Is it time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome, one and all, to a Sunday evening edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular, of course.
Hello.
How's everybody doing tonight? Great crowd in here to start things off tonight. That was the lead singer from a band called Disturbed.
Yes, that was whoops, sorry about that.
No, it's because I didn't stop the video. That's why.
Okay.
Now you're good.
All right. So that's rabid Zionist David Draymond from Disturbed signing bombs for the IDF.
Now we know who Nikki Haley cheats on her husband with.
Seriously. He's been seen going out the back door.
Mm-hmm.
So here he addressed the boos that he got. This was at Ozzy Osbourne's farewell performance, which I got to say, I saw some clips. It was very moving. It's quite touching. Went back to his hometown, Birmingham. But it was all these metal acts paying tribute, Disturbed among them. So he addressed it here. Yes, there were a few boos when I walked out, but I came to pay homage to my teachers, my idols, the mighty Black Sabbath. And I wasn't about to let a few Jew-hating morons deter that. It's all about feeding their narrative, generating clickbait, and exciting hatred of Jews. Now, you should go over to his X because it's pretty interesting. It's basically a love letter to metal, to genocide, and to Superman. Who knew? Who knew those things work so easily together on the same X account? He's very excited about the upcoming Superman. Maybe because it's the first Jewish Superman.
I mean, that's a trifecta for a lot of these.
Quite a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah, for a lot of these online people. Yeah.
So he addressed band Bob Villain here. When it comes to hate mongers like you, I think I rather prefer the sound of silence. You should have encouraged building bridges instead of burning them down. Shameful abuse of the gift of music. Your 5 minutes are up. Yisrael, hi, sweetheart. Yeah, so that's pretty typical of his X account, cheering on the attacks on Iran, that kind of thing. Is Ozzy still married to Sharon Osbourne? Because she's another one.
Yeah, she's another one.
She was livid about Kneecap being included at Glastonbury.
Yeah. Yeah, no, she is one. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they're still together. I don't know. That'd be interesting to find out. She still got his name, right? So
Sharon, it's a fucking genocide. Yeah. You know it, I know it. Shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
That would be that would be the reboot of the Osbournes reality series.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Well, yeah, he got quite a reception there. Yeah, it's funny, I guess some people just don't don't adjust to the news. It's amazing how you still have people doing the I'm Yisrael hide now. I mean, it's crazy stuff. Crazy stuff, horrible stuff. By the way, folks, we will be switching to Rumble for the final 2 segments of the show tonight, and then we do have the Q&A over there as well. So we got plenty to get to this evening, and we have a great crowd in here to start things off. 1,200 strong already in the YouTube chats and 623 strong in the Rumble chats. Shout out to Jake in the booth. Jake is here with us tonight, fielding your Rumble rants and helping us out backstage. So thank you, as always, to Jake. All right, we are going to jump right in here. So, folks, the big news of the day, horrible news, and this headline is actually obsolete news. Last I saw, the death count was north of 70, but as of a couple hours ago, death toll from Texas floods reached 67, including 21 children. The death toll from catastrophic floods in Texas reached at least 67 on Sunday, including 21 children, as the search for girls missing from a summer camp entered a 3rd day. Larry Litha, the Kerr County Sheriff in Texas Hill Country, the epicenter of the flooding, said the death toll in Kerr County had reached 59, including the 21 children. Litha said 11 girls and a counselor remained missing from a summer camp near the Guadalupe River, which broke its banks after torrential rain fell in the central Texas area on Friday, the U.S. Independence Day holiday. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, of course, was activated on Sunday and is deploying resources to first responders in Texas after President Donald Trump issued a major disaster declaration, the Department of Homeland Security said in a statement. United States Coast Guard helicopters and planes are helping the search and rescue efforts, DHS said. Trump has previously outlined plans to scale back the federal government's role in responding to natural disasters, leaving states to shoulder more of the burden themselves. I got to say, rough weekend to launch a political party whose core thesis is that Doge didn't go far enough. Really rough timing on that.
Bad timing.
Ouch.
Bad time. You know who's really excited about that announcement, though? Tesla shareholders.
Yeah, yes, exactly, yes.
They are so looking forward to the opening bell tomorrow.
Yeah, they are stoked, I bet, right? Some experts question whether cuts to the federal workforce by the Trump administration, including to the agency that oversees the National Weather Service, led to a failure by officials to accurately predict the severity of the floods and issue appropriate warnings ahead of the storm. Trump's administration has overseen thousands of job cuts from the National Weather Service's parent agency, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, leaving many weather offices understaffed, said former NOAA Director Rick Spinrad. He said he did not know if those staff cuts factored into the lack of advance warning for the extreme Texas flooding, but that they would inevitably degrade the agency's ability to deliver accurate and timely forecasts, and timely being the key word there. It was actually much more important in this recent example to be timely than it was to be 100% accurate about the scope of the event itself.
Oh, hang on. All those federal workers weren't just lazy loafers sucking off the government teat?
No, they weren't just fat to be trimmed. Right, exactly. Exactly. That's the main takeaway from this story here, for sure. So here is Secretary Ducklips herself, Kristi Noem, being asked about why the National Weather Service hadn't pinged their phones before 7 a.m. when the flooding happened in the wee hours of the morning, well before 7 a.m. So, in other words, by the time people were notified, hey, there's an emergency, it was essentially too late. So here's Kristi Noem.
Why was the National Weather Service not pinging their phones before 7 o'clock this day of 4th of July? Maybe the federal people can answer that maybe for us. I got updates at 7 o'clock. The first one I heard. And I've heard updates throughout the week, but not before 7 o'clock in the morning. Wasn't that a fundamental failure of the federal government's responsibility to keep us safe?
Okay, now before she answers that question, I do just want to go. This is going to come up later in the slideshow, but I think it's important that you know this now. Here's the timeline and severity of the flood. So you could see it was a major emergency well before 7 a.m. Well before 7 a.m. Major emergency at a little after 4 a.m. So by 7 a.m., it was far too late to start notifying people, hey, there's water out there. Everybody knew it, obviously.
Well, you know, my background is before I was in the secretary position here under the Trump administration, I was governor of South Dakota and served in Congress for 8 years before I was governor. And so I will tell you that for decades, for years, everybody knows that the weather is extremely difficult to predict, but also that the National Weather Service over the years at times has done well, and at times we have all wanted more time and more warning and more alerts and more notification. That is something, and one of the reasons that when President Trump took office, that he said he wanted to fix, and is currently upgrading the technology, and the National Weather Service has indicated that with that and NOAA that we needed to renew this ancient system that has been left in place with the federal government for many, many years, and that is the reforms that are ongoing there. The timeline that I have, I don't oversee the National Weather Service, that's not under my department, but the timeline that I did receive from them.
I mostly do photo ops at torture prisons and pretend to join ICE roundups. That's basically my function. My function is to basically curl my hair, put on 7 layers of makeup and the most obnoxious lipstick I can find and pretend to torture immigrants. That's really what I do. I don't really do much in the way of actual work. So you have to take it up with someone who can answer that question better.
I generally have my husband and his friends dress up as CCOT detainees and pretend to have been accidentally locked in with them overnight while I kick a dog.
Yes,
And
right.
that's really the only way I can orgasm.
Yeah,
to be honest with you.
It's a role playing thing that we do. This is sort of someone else's department.
Was that the notifications started to look at its expansion for its limited flood impact area that started on July 3rd at 1:18 p.m. The flood watch was issued. Although it was moderate, it wasn't to the extremes that it was, that when the system came over the area that it stalled, it was much more water, much like I think we experienced during Harvey, the same type of system that was unpredictable in the way that it reacted and the way that it stopped right here and dumped unprecedented amounts of rain that caused a flooding event like this. They continued to elevate and up their notifications. You know, when your notification hit your phone, sir, I'm sorry, I can't speak to when that is, but I do carry your concerns back to the federal government and to President Trump, and we will do all we can to fix those kinds of things that may have felt like a failure to you and to your community members. But we know that everybody wants more warning time, and that's why we're working to upgrade the technologies that have been neglected by far too long to make sure that families have as much advanced notice as possible. But
okay, so, you know, she's throwing some shade at the previous administration there, while exercising a surprising amount of judgment to know it would look bad if she came out and explicitly shifted blame in that way. But, of course, Donald Trump, with Elon Musk's help, ironically, since they are really in bitch fight mode again today. But it is their fault that the National Weather Service was understaffed and that these warnings did not get where they had to go in time. Now, on the local side, there is some blame as well. This is an example of widespread systemic failure. But of course, Donald Trump has not made an effort to make the system better. What he has done has objectively made it a lot worse. So the youngest girls at Camp Mystic were sleeping just feet from the river before horrific Texas floods, with 5 dead and 12 missing. That's as of 11 a.m. this morning. So once again, a failure in notification time, a failure of the alert system, meant that these girls were sleeping very, very close to the water's edge as the water level rose with at an unbelievably rapid pace, which I'll show you in a minute. The youngest girls at Camp Mystic in Texas were asleep in cabins as little as 225 feet from the river when flash flooding suddenly surged, causing the water to rise 20 feet above flood stage in just 90 minutes, starting around 4 a.m. on July 4th. At least 5 girls from the camp have been confirmed dead, all ages 8 and 9, and 12 others still missing. So this is a video that's getting around now. This is a pretty astonishing piece of video. Please do not victim shame. This is what a Texas Hill Country flash flood looks like. So obviously we're not victim shaming here, but
who the hell would shame the victims?
Yeah, who would shame the victim? I don't know who is shaming the victims there. It's a bit of a straw man, but the video itself is quite amazing. So this was a 37-minute video taken from a guy standing on an overpass right above where this flooding happened. And there's no cuts in this video. It's just 37 minutes straight. Obviously, we're not going to show you the entire thing. But what I will show you is the first 60 seconds so you can see in real time just how fast the water level rises. And then I timestamped different points throughout the video so you could get a sense of just how unbelievably quickly this happened and why it was so extraordinarily dangerous to have anybody near this river at the time that this was happening. So here we go. We're going to start the video now. So this, where it starts, is at 0 minutes and 0 seconds. I'm starting it at the exact beginning of the video. And like I said, this guy is obviously standing on an overpass of sorts, and he did not cut the camera, so there's no manipulation of this footage. And you can see the water coming down. So now we're at about 25 seconds. So it went from where we started to this in just 25 seconds. Now we're at 30. And you could already see, you could barely see the ground where those trees are standing. So now you're at 40 seconds. You already have rapids. 40 seconds. It was dry 40 seconds ago. And now here you are. So in 10 seconds, it's going to jump to about the 2-minute mark. And then there's a couple other timestamps that you'll see. It's really pretty extraordinary. I mean, it's pretty terrifying. So that's the 2-minute mark. Look at that. Those trees are now completely submerged. Right. Look at 3.5 minutes.
Wow.
It went from what we just saw to that in 3.5 minutes.
That's insane.
5 minutes. Eight minutes. Now it's almost up to the overpass. You saw how high he was above the ground there. $12 minutes. $14 minutes. It's pretty much up to the overpass.
This guy gonna get off that overpass or what?
He leaves at some point, but yeah, 16:45. Now all that
20,
land
was that like 20 feet of water right there?
20 feet of water. All that land. Look at 21 minutes.
21 minutes.
It's
from
battering
nothing.
the overpass.
Wow.
From dry to that in 21 minutes. That's how dangerous an event that was. So when asked how Texas authorities could leave so many campers in danger, not sure Kerrville city manager suggesting the media is partially to blame for crying wolf and hyping things up is the best way to handle a press conference. So yes, here is the city manager.
So many campers in the way of this danger and not taken out of there ahead of this war.
Yeah, you know, that's the question of the hour. But, you know, with these, this is last time it was this bad, and this one is even worse than that was 1987. You can't predict it. Everybody in the media even knows, everybody who does this and sees this every single day, you have the inverse effect of if you continue to push it, and you see this in Houston areas all the time, you cry wolf. What happens when you continue to, ramp things up and you continue to put a lot of information out there? Again, not to, harp on the media, but there's a lot of stuff that gets overspun up, and we see that way too often, and then that trickles down. So we did look at stuff. Obviously, I had told the story. I was out on the river trail at 3:30. I left about 4 o'clock. We did not see any signs of the river rising, and by 5:20, we almost weren't able to get out of the park on the upper end. It rose that quickly.
Okay, so that's obviously not a great look to be talking about the media hyping things up and crying wolf, given what happened. Now, the error was, yes, on the forecasting side, but the far more meaningful error was on the system alert side, was on the notification side. The fact that it took so long to get the word out, because there was obviously, as we just showed you in that time-lapse video, no time to spare. And here is a pretty damning report in the New York Times this morning. As floods hit, key roles were vacant at Weather Service offices in Texas. Crucial positions at the local offices of the National Weather Service were unfilled as severe rainfall inundated parts of central Texas on Friday morning, prompting some experts to question whether staffing shortages made it harder for the forecasting agency to coordinate with local emergency managers as floodwaters rose. Texas officials appeared to blame the Weather Service for issuing forecasts on Wednesday that underestimated how much rain was coming. But former Weather Service officials said the forecasts were as good as could be expected given the enormous levels of rainfall and the storm's unusually abrupt escalation. Well, yes, you just saw the video. I'll show you another time-lapse video in a minute. You can't really forecast more precisely than that, right? In other words, if the water level can go from 0 to 20 feet in 21 minutes, right? Then what you're talking about is really a failure of coordination in the moment. Because, okay, let's say you get it wrong and it only rises 12 feet in 20 minutes or whatever the final number was. I don't know if that was 20, maybe it was 12. I think it took an hour to get to whatever the number is. The point is, you could tell there's going to be catastrophic flooding, but if it rises that quickly, then really the forecasting, I mean, obviously it's good to be as accurate as you can, but the much more relevant failure here was of the lack of coordination once you got closer to the event and you could tell, okay, this is going to be worse than we thought. In other words, to say that, well, Wednesday you should have known about this, okay, all right, you could say that. But they knew it was going to happen. They knew things were getting bad at 2 a.m. Friday, and it took till 7 for people's phones to start pinging that there was a problem. So Texas officials appeared to blame the Weather Service for issuing forecasts that underestimated how much rain was coming. The staffing shortages suggested a separate problem, those former officials said. The loss of experienced people who would typically have helped communicate with local authorities in the hours after flash flood warnings were issued overnight. The shortages are among the factors likely to be scrutinized as the death toll climbs from the floods. Separate questions have emerged about the preparedness of local communities, including Kerr County's apparent lack of a local flood warning system, which is pretty astounding that they don't have a local flood warning system, given this is hill country. The county, roughly 50 miles northwest of San Antonio, is where many of the deaths occurred. The National Weather Service's San Angelo office, which is responsible for some of the areas hit hardest by Friday's flooding, was missing a senior hydrologist, staff forecaster, and meteorologist in charge, according to Tom Fahey, the legislative director for the National Weather Service Employees Organization, the union that represents Weather Service workers. The Weather Service's nearby San Antonio office, which covers other areas hit by the floods, also had significant vacancies, including a warning coordination meteorologist and science officer, Mr. Fahey said. Staff members in those positions are meant to work with local emergency managers to plan for floods, including when and how to warn local residents and help them evacuate. That office's warning coordination meteorologist left on April 30th after taking the early retirement package the Trump administration used to reduce the number of federal employees, according to a person with knowledge of his departure. I will repeat that because it bears repeating. That office's warning coordination meteorologist left on April 30th after taking the early retirement package the Trump administration used to reduce the number of federal employees. Pretty damning stuff. Some of the openings may predate the current Trump administration, but at both offices, the vacancy rate is roughly double what it was when Trump returned to the White House in January, according to Mr. Fahey. John Sokich, who until January was director of congressional affairs for the National Weather Service, said those unfilled positions made it harder to coordinate with local officials because each Weather Service office works as a team. Reduced staffing puts that in jeopardy, he said. The amount of rain that fell Friday morning was hard for the Weather Service to anticipate, with reports in some areas of 15 inches over just a few hours, according to Louis W. Uccellini, who was director of the National Weather Service from 2013 until 2022. It's pretty hard to forecast these kinds of rainfall rates, Dr. Uccellini said. He said that climate change was making extreme rainfall events more frequent and severe, and that more research was needed so that Weather Service could better forecast those events. An equally important question, he added, was how the Weather Service was coordinating with local emergency managers to act on those warnings as they came in. You have to have a response mechanism that involves local officials, Dr. Uccellini said. It involves a relationship with the emergency management community at every level, but that requires having staff members in those positions, he said. So they had vacancies on both ends. That's why I'm saying, yes, it's partly a local failure, but obviously it goes up to D.C. as well. Under the Trump administration, the Weather Service, like other federal agencies, has been pushed to reduce its number of employees. By this spring, through layoffs and retirements, the Weather Service has lost nearly 600 people from a workforce that until recently was as large as 4,000. So that's about a 15% drop. Now, here are local Texas officials blaming the National Weather Service for a faulty forecast in the deadly flood disaster. So they're trying to put the blame entirely on the National Weather Service.
That we received on Wednesday from the National Weather Service predicted 3 to 6 inches of rain in the Concho Valley and 4 to 8 inches of rain in the Hill Country. We worked with our own meteorologists to fine-tune that weather statement, and as many of you know, and many of you in broadcast journalism and meteorology, you can go back and look at your own forecast, and the amount of rain that fell in this specific location was never in any of those forecasts.
This rain event sat on top of that and dumped more rain than what was forecasted on both of those forks. When we got the report, it was about 7 feet or so on the South Fork, and within a matter of minutes it was up to 29 feet, and all of that converged at the Guadalupe, and that's where we saw those very quick rise in flood.
But listen, everybody got the forecast from the National Weather Service, right? You all got it. You're all in media. You got that forecast. It did not predict the amount of rain that we saw.
Wow. Now, in addition to this, because this was supposed to be in the slideshow, I guess it got deleted by mistake, but part of that article says that Rob Kelly, the Kerr County judge and its most senior elected official, said the county did not have a warning system because such systems are expensive. I'm reading from the article now, and local residents are resistant to new spending. Taxpayers won't pay for it, Mr. Kelly said. Asked if people might reconsider in light of the catastrophe, he said, I don't know. So this is what I mean. It is, yes, both a local failure and a national failure. And what you're seeing here is the consequence of the Doge ethos. I mean, that this is essentially one of those things where when you're going through and just haphazardly saying, afuera, afuera, afuera. Yeah, well, on 99 out of 100 days, something like this isn't going to happen. But the reason you have systems in place is because on that 100th day, you have a tragedy like this. And once again, this just gives you an even more dramatic time lapse. So this is over the course of 50 minutes reduced down to about 30 seconds. So this is ultra fast motion, but this just shows you how in less than an hour, the water level rising. So that was in about 15 minutes, 17:10, 17:30. I mean, it is just really, really extraordinary. So once again, here, which we showed you earlier, the timeline of the flooding, you go from no flooding at all at 3 a.m. to over 22 feet in just over an hour. So you have the locals blaming the federal officials. You have Donald Trump saying what he's saying, which I'll show you in a couple of minutes. But then you have the question, okay, well, why were these systems gutted? Why were they so unprepared? Why were they so reliant on forecasts from 2 days out? Why didn't they have an emergency system in place, a notification system in place? Since it's not like you can say that this just came out of nowhere. Why Texas Hill Country, where a devastating flood killed dozens, is one of the deadliest places in the U.S. for flash flooding. So what makes Hill Country so prone to flooding? This is from the conversation. Texas as a whole leads the nation in flood deaths, and by a wide margin. A colleague and I analyzed data from 1959 to 2019 and found 1,069 people had died in flooding in Texas over those 6 decades. The next highest total was in Louisiana with 693. Many of those flood deaths have been in Hill County. It's part of an area known as Flash Flood Alley. I'm assuming you meant Hill Country, typo there. A crescent of land that curves from Dallas down to San Antonio and then westward. The hills are steep and the water moves quickly when it floods. This is a semi-arid area with soils that don't soak up much water, so the water sheets off quickly and the shallow creeks can rise fast. When those creeks converge on a river, they can create a surge of water that wipes out homes and washes away cars, and unfortunately, anyone in its path. So fairly simple to understand. You don't have to be a scientist to understand that. If you have a hilly, dry area, that means that the soil is too hard to absorb a lot of that water as it rains, and so that can create flooding. So essentially what that means is that you really can't claim that you were caught off guard by this or that this was a fluke incident. This has been an area prone to very dangerous floods for the past 60 plus years. And so now we're going to hear from Donald Trump alongside Howard Lutnick on the tarmac here, or runway, wherever they are. We have a couple of different sound bites here from Donald Trump in response to this event. So we're going to cue this up. These just broke before we started, so I have to screen share these. So a reporter asks, are you investigating whether some of the cuts to the federal government left key vacancies at the National Weather Service? So let's take a look at this clip first.
Okay. Are you investigating whether some of the cuts to the federal government left key vacancies at the National Weather Service or in the emergency coordination?
No, they did not. They did. I'll tell you, if you look at that, what a situation that all is, and that was really the Biden setup. That was not our setup, but I wouldn't blame Biden for it either. I would just say this is a 100-year catastrophe, and it's just so horrible to watch. Are you planning to visit Texas?
You have Lutnick.
It was not. Whether some of the cuts to the federal government left key vacancies at the National Weather Service or in the emergency coordination?
No, they did not. They did. I'll tell you. That situation that all is, and that was really the Biden setup. That was not our setup, but I wouldn't blame Biden for it.
All right, it was the Biden setup. It wasn't your setup, but you wouldn't blame Biden for it either. So if he's not blaming Biden for it, that means he knows it's his fuck up. It's his fuck up. Here's a reporter asking, are you still planning to phase out FEMA? And Trump says, well, we'll talk about that later. So here is Donald Trump asked if he has any second thoughts about eliminating FEMA in the wake of this horrible disaster.
Are you still planning to phase out FEMA?
Well, FEMA is something we can talk about later. But right now they're busy working, so we'll leave it at that. Go ahead.
Are you still...
Wow. So, look, obviously a horrible tragedy. These children, many dead, many more missing. With each moment that goes by that they're not found, the outlook becomes grimmer and grimmer, obviously. And, you know, I feel like, you know, there's a lot of middle ground between, you know, some of the blue MAGA takes here. Where, well, this is what you get. You know, you don't never want to come off as insensitive. But these are teachable moments. And if you don't use these as teachable moments, then these losses are, in fact, in vain. This is why Doge was a ridiculous idea to begin with. What the premise of it was. You know, you have these ideologues who prey on people's disillusionment and rightful frustration and anger at institutions and experts who need to be trusted. And they take that to such an extreme that they, like I said, weaponize people's despair and use it against them in ways that are, of course, inviting disasters like this. This loss of life did not have to happen. Obviously, in a situation like this, you're almost certainly going to have some loss of life. But it's quite obvious. It's quite obvious that if there were people manning the switches, if there were people manning their posts, as there should have been, people would have gotten advance warning of this in enough time to evacuate. You saw those videos. You saw how quickly this happened. You saw how much every minute counts in a situation like this. The fact that there were no notifications being sent out until well after this was a major flood is inexcusable. It is inexcusable, and you can say with certainty that you would not have had anywhere near this death count had people been manning their posts and communicating with each other. And the fact that that did not happen, you have to look at this and say, is a function of the ideology put in action by this administration when they came in. And tragically, it did not take long for this lesson to be learned. And what that judge said, will people take a different approach to this? Will people start thinking a little bit differently about this? He says, I don't know. I don't know. Because people are propagandized to think that these billionaire robber barons who want to slash all of this, who want to basically pick apart this system so that they don't have to pay for things like that. That is what motivates them. That propaganda is very effective. It's very effective, and you always want to have empathy for the victims of this. Obviously, you're not human if you don't feel empathy for these poor kids and their families. But this is also a teachable moment. This is also a teachable moment when people come in and make a big show of how fun it'll be. Afuera, chainsaw. Well, this is what that leads to. Like these are the consequences of that. You have to be able to make that connection, I think.
Right. Well, Trump is, as very often happens with Trump, in spite of what his policies might be, in spite of how easy he is for the very deep state actors that he'll often indicate he's aware of and in opposition to, are able to control him and get him to do their will. Once in a while, he just tells the truth. Now, this is not a 100-year problem in the making, but it is a 50 or so year problem in the making. We used to invest in government, not coincidentally, at a time when the top tax rate was about 90%.
Right.
I think when Reagan came in, it was a little lower than that. I think it was in the 70s when Reagan came in, but still high enough to fund things. This is a problem that long predates Trump. Yes. Trump, what he evades there is that his policies are taking this trend to its logical conclusion of just the final gutting of the government. The idea that they sold you that the federal government, after decades of Reaganomics under every president, it's just been shades of Reaganomics. It's just been a question of how extreme this trickle-down philosophy has been applied under different presidents. But the drift of it has been, at best, public-private partnership, right? Reducing the size of government. The idea that after decades of that, you had tens of thousands of federal workers who weren't really doing anything is fucking absurd. And this is where you see it. They had already pared everything down. You go any place in this country, including the city that I live in, one of the wealthiest cities on earth, literally the city where Wall Street is. You go into the courthouses, they're beautifully constructed. They're these beautiful marble buildings from an era when we took pride in the institutions of civic society, and we wanted our buildings to demonstrate that pride. You go in, you can see that architecture. They're filthy, man. They're filthy. They're under-maintained because everywhere in this country, a philosophy of cutting taxes for the rich, funneling most of the money up to the top, and putting the absolute bare minimum into social good, that presides anywhere you go in the country. The idea that after decades of that, there was that much waste in the system, what you could say is I'm sure there was a lot of technological inefficiency in the system because of that underinvestment. You know what you would need to fix that? You would need to invest in government. Right. One of the things that is very striking, if you go to the 9/11 museum, there's a Pentagon section there. They're still working with Rolodexes in 2001. They still have the old push button phones in 2001. So yes, he's right. This underfunding of the government, even the military, didn't start now. I mean, a lot of that money, you talk about the enormous military budget, a lot of that money is just getting shoved into the pockets of the defense contractors. They're not going to upgrading the systems to modern systems in the way that they should be. But the waste is not at the level of human resources, of they have too many people working at the weather service. And this is why people don't want to fly now. You know, they've done polling. A majority of people now are afraid to fly, and they should be. They should be. Look at this. Look at this. How many jobs are unfilled at the FAA after what these maniacs did? And as Trump said, that problem didn't start with him, but what they did made these problems much, much worse. And this is just the first of these things. Wait until food poisoning starts to explode, cases of poor maintenance leading to bridge collapses, road collapses. Over the next few years, this country is going to become a fucking nightmare. And what you have to remember in regards to what you were talking about, they have a vested interest in misdirecting people away from blaming them for the state of the country. Who controls the media? Who controls the means of communication? Rich people do. And when social media reared its head as a kind of more democratic platform, what did they do? They manipulated the Benny Johnsons into the conversation, the cat turds into the conversation, the Eric Dohertys into the conversation. They slipped them in as fake independent voices to shepherd you into blaming immigrants, lazy federal workers, welfare people, Muslims, whatever. As long as you don't blame the people who, in some cases, have billions and billions of dollars and pay almost nothing in taxes. Anything to keep you from looking at them.
Right. Of course. Of course. And it's a compounding thing. It's a compounding thing. What do I mean by that? Well, once you start underfunding the government and you start sabotaging government agencies, then you look at the government agencies and you say, see, what a waste of money this is. Isn't it crap? Why are we paying for this? Well, it's crap because you sabotaged it to begin with. So now you sabotage it further. The argument against socialized medicine, what, you want your hospital to look like DMV? Well, why does the DMV suck? The DMV sucks because you underfund the DMV, right? I mean, so like it's something where they use one effort of sabotage to then sabotage it even further to the point where now you have an entire movement. One of the pillars is, according to Steve Bannon, the dismantling of the administrative state. Well, this is a result of that.
Right.
This is a result of that.
That's what that looks like. That's
you want to piss on these Weather Service people? Oh, they're a bunch of bureaucrats collecting a check from my hard-earned tax dollars. They don't do anything. Well, maybe 99 out of 100 days they don't. But on that 100th day when you need them, sucks not to have them there. Sucks not to have them there. And that's what happened here. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it's a horrible, tragic event. And the way to make sure that this event did not happen in vain is to learn from it and to communicate to people that, you know, this is not a fucking game. You know, these oligarchs make it a big show of it's CPAC. We're going to go and wave a chainsaw around on stage with Javier Milei as if this is a big fucking game. It's not a game when your whole town gets washed away. In Hill Country, a place where they know is prone to dangerous flooding, and they still open vacancies double what they were in January. Yes, this has been something going on for years. This has been rapidly accelerated by Donald Trump and Elon Musk, who's launching his new party this weekend under the premise that Doge didn't go far enough. Wow.
Yeah. Look, these people literally burned down your house and then showed up at the ashes and said, what happened? What can I do to help? Oh, you know what? I think that guy next door burned down your house. You know what? If you put me in power, I'm going to send that guy to Sudan.
Right. Yes, exactly. Yes, that's exactly it. Exactly it. Michael Ewan says, who's more competent, America Party or the Greens? Well, time will tell, my friends.
Well, we'll see.
Party
we'll
is
see.
Pretty young.
I got to say, man, I mean, you know, we'll get into it in the next segment, but it's just at this point, what the fuck? Like, is Elon in a K-hole? Like, what? At this point, I'm almost ready to predict that the Tesla board gets rid of him.
Could be. Yes. It's not going to be great opening bell tomorrow, I don't think. Virtuoso, thanks for the $5. David Draymond is down with the sickness known as Zionism. Yes, thank you, Virtuoso. Matrix says, thank you for the $4.99 Sphincter Knucklebuster. That's Matrix's signature super chat there. Andy Gardner, thanks for the $5. Does the Trump and Elon continued beef explain why Cat Turd thinks Grok is woke? Your thoughts on this important matter? Thanks. You know, that brings me to an important personal announcement, which is that, you know, I actually spent these last few days not checking Twitter often enough to know exactly what you're talking about, which I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of. You know, we had a long weekend. I spent it with the family. I tried to get away from this stuff a little bit. You know, I got to stay on it because we do the show, but you know, I used to be in that all the time, and it's not good for you. So I did see some chattering about Grok.
Terrible. It's the worst.
Going woke, but I'm not as on top of things as I usually am, and I probably will not be as on top of those things moving forward. That's an exciting announcement for the audience. It's an exciting development for the audience.
I never understood why you spend that much time on there.
Well, it
doesn't
I'm
do
just
enough
looking for shit to do. But yeah, exactly. Well, no, I'm not talking about engage. I'm like on there trying to build the empire. I just, you know, you get addicted to like checking the news every now and then.
Oh, you actually got sucked in.
Well, yeah, you check it just out of reflex because you're used to wanting to know what the news is. But, you know, we had a few days off. I'm like, you know what? I don't have to know what the news is right now. I can know in an hour. So, yeah, because of that, I'm not as familiar with that. But I have heard some complaints about Grok. So maybe I'll look into it. Maybe we'll do something on Tuesday if it's funny enough. Yes.
Yeah, if any of you follow me on X, you might notice I almost exclude. Once in a while, I'll do a little commentary. But usually I just share memes. Yeah, because I don't want to spend time there.
Yeah, no.
You know, it's like a glory hole. I'm just gonna pretend I didn't see you here, and you pretend you didn't see me here.
There you go. You should develop a social media app called Glory Hole. Yeah. Killer Hittin says, I've been lonely lately, but then I remember how much I've been let down by literally everyone I've ever opened up to. Then I have bourbon and watch Kubrick with my cats. Free Palestine and stuff. Oh, well, feel better, Killer Hittin. Thanks for being here tonight. Forget Elon's new party and support Corn Pop's boycott on Carnival Cruise Line. This aggression will not stand. Thank you, Abiding. Appreciate that. Eric Crusoe says, how do you circumcise a Jewish Superman? Ah, good one. Good one. Albert Brooks' artist wife, Kimberly, is a Zionist also. She's illustrating a book written by Emily Schrader. Yeah, I forgot to look into that, too. I wanted to look up who his wife was, because I've always been a fan of Albert Brooks. I like Albert Brooks.
I mean, I got to say, it doesn't surprise me.
No, it doesn't surprise me. Sharon Osbourne looks like one of those aliens from They Live, says Eric Crusoe. Appreciate that. And Eric Crusoe says Trump tried to use the secret weather weapon on Elon. Thanks. You know, this would have been a great week for Trump to just throw Elon under the bus. See, this is why I told them we shouldn't go this far with Doge, because then this will happen. You know, it's his fault. Trump should have blamed the flood on Elon. That would have been perfect.
And very on brand.
Yes, very, very on brand. I don't know why I ever listened to that guy's biggest mistake I ever made. Biggest mistake I ever made. Now look at Texas. It's a disaster because of him.
Look what happened. I told him, Elon, you got to go very slow. You got to be very careful. A lot of these people have families. He was a maniac. He was a maniac. He just didn't listen.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he told me that he had stuff on me from the Epstein files. I didn't know if he was bluffing. You know, I didn't know. Maybe he's bluffing. Maybe he's not.
I still don't know. That's why he has all these contracts still.
Yeah, right. I don't know if he's bluffing or not. He's got a good poker face, that guy. I tell you. Don't sit at a table with that guy. Lose your shirt.
It's I read an article that said sociopaths have an advantage in poker.
Yeah. Exactly. All right, let's move on to the America Party.
All right. So this is former White House power bottom Elon Musk in happier times. I love real Donald Trump as much as a straight man can love another man. Yeah, but things went bad real quick. Time to drop the really big bomb. Donald Trump is in the Epstein files. That is the real reason they have not been made public.
Great.
Have a nice day, DJT.
Have a nice
Yeah,
day.
no. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Yeah, you should have done that.
Yeah, there's no coming back from that. So then, as a free man, he went on to attack the big, beautiful bill relentlessly. If this insane spending bill passes, the America Party will be formed the next day. Our country needs an alternative to the Democrat-Republican uniparty so that people actually have a voice. And then he went and did a poll. Independence Day is the perfect time to ask if you want independence from the two-party, some would say uniparty system. Should we create the America Party? So he got 65.4% voting yes, which he takes as this is out of 1,248,856 votes. So clearly an overwhelming majority of Americans want Elon Musk to lead a third party. What more evidence do you need of that? By a factor of 2 to 1, you want a new political party, and you shall have it. Are you not entertained? When it comes to bankrupting our country with waste and graft, we live in a one-party system, not a democracy. Today, the America Party is formed to give you back your freedom. I will say he was true to his word, right? Because this was like the next day.
Oh, yeah.
This was the day after the bill.
And he's got his
hey,
shit
man,
together, this guy.
He's got it together. In spite of what you might have heard about the relentless drug use and the 13 illegitimate kids. Breaking, it's official. An FEC filing under Elon Musk's name just confirmed the creation of a brand new political vehicle, the America Party. And just to show you, this is not simply his business transferred over to a political party. He hired his CFO from Tesla as the treasurer and custodian of records. So basically, this is a bid to put Tesla, the corporation, in charge of America, it looks like. The way we're going to crack the uniparty system is by using a variant of how Epaminondas shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility at Leuctra. Extremely concentrated force at a precise location on the battlefield. Now, I just want to comment on this for a second. We just did a thing about Peter Thiel last week, in which he similarly makes a lot of references and allusions to classical civilization and the Renaissance. This is very typical of these Silicon Valley uber nerds to try to connect their business endeavors to the age of heroes and to classical antiquity. Now, this didn't start with them. This started almost as soon as you got the Industrial Revolution. You started to get the robber barons like Carnegie trying to find moral, philosophical, and intellectual justification for their wealth and for their leading position in society. You can't base it on being a member of the warrior class anymore. That continued all the way into World War II. If you were royalty, you were expected to sign up to serve in World War II. Like the idea that you had to be a member of the warrior class to be morally qualified to lead continued all the way into that. So what do a bunch of pencil-necked geeks do to connect themselves to that history? Well, Ayn Rand gave them the mythology, right? She gave them the paradigm for that wresting materials out of the ground and building these factories, that makes you just like Alexander. You are the classical hero in a modern context. And it's also connecting them to the long period when leading members of society were expected to have a classical education. Even though most of these guys do not have that, they're putting on that affectation of the earlier ruling classes that actually did have that education. And this also, I mean, the reason this is important is when you look at Peter Thiel, when you look at Elon Musk, when you look at the so-called intellectual dark web, this is part of what makes them fetishize Western civilization to the extent that they do, because they're casting themselves as the inheritors and defenders of it in connection to these heroes of classical antiquity. And that determines their influence on foreign policy, their attitudes towards Israel in profound ways. So he got some endorsements here. He got some important endorsements.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
The mooch is into the idea. I would like to meet to discuss. My DMs are open. We should invite him on.
We should.
His DMs are open. Should have the mooch on. Mark Cuban likes the idea.
I'd love to have the mooch on. That would be great.
I work with. He might come on actually.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Mets. You know.
I work with voter choice. They will help you get on ballots. That is their mission. All right. So Mark Cuban likes the idea. That's not surprising that he'd be into like an all oligarch, trickle down economics, but without all the crazy erraticism of the Trump administration. You know, technocracy by the elites.
Right.
The redheaded libertarian. Do you want to take over the Libertarian Party? We're not really using it. Yeah. Yes. True that. True that. Michael Tracy, what's your position on the current $1 trillion military budget? And why didn't Doge follow through on your pledge to audit the Pentagon? That I would love to see someone ask him that.
Quiet,
I don't know that
question.
anyone he's going to be willing to talk to is going to ask him that. Gene Trevino, is this new American Party going to undo the massive tax cuts you just received? Is this new American Party going to undo the massive cuts to Americans' health care? Is this new American Party going to undo the massive cuts to feed American families and children? Is this new American Party going to undo the massive firings, push-outs, and buyouts you did under Doge, costing the jobs of thousands of Americans? These are also questions I expect he's not going to answer. Pro-America politics. Nothing will appeal more to the working class than a political party run by the richest man in the world who wants to raise taxes and gut entitlement programs. Yeah, I don't know that the people who follow Elon Musk on X are really a representative sample of the nation as a whole. But he's excited, man. He's excited. He's trying to drum up a lot of excitement around when and where should we hold the inaugural American Party conference. This will be super fun. They're very evocative of the way he would have these different promotional events to get people into the Wisconsin judges race. We see how well that worked out for him. So this was just breaking right before we went on. Trump was finally asked about this.
Elon Musk starting a third party.
I think it's ridiculous to start a third party. We have a tremendous success with the Republican Party. The Democrats have lost their way, but it's always been a two-party system. And I think starting a third party just adds to confusion. It really seems to have been developed for two parties. Third parties have never worked. So he can have fun with it, but I think it's ridiculous.
Okay, so I'm going to say right here, right now, I think we can safely say, if that's as far as it goes, and we'll see, he also truthed out something. If his retaliation remains rhetorical, Elon definitely has shit on him, probably from Epstein Island. This is a guy who, as soon as he got in office, went after every law firm that ever looked at him funny. This is a famously vengeful man. If he lets Elon start a third party and keep his government contracts, Elon absolutely has Epstein file shit on him. No question. We will see. We will see. Now, I can't speak to whether this is authentic. Peter B. has a pretty big account. He tweeted out, American Party first meeting image revealed. Don't ask me how I got it. So according to him, this looks like a kind of inner circle meeting before whatever big convention they're conceiving. Again,
very diverse,
not authenticated. It is for Elon.
Yes,
that is a very diverse room.
They have great values.
Yeah. Well, he's gonna have to soften his Nazi image. He's gonna have to stop throwing the Roman salute if he really wants to get traction. Also, they're really doing major cope, saying they can pick up disaffected Democrats, so this won't just be a drain on Republican votes. Whether they actually believe that, who knows? But hey, you might know that Elon was pretty much a conventional lib who would have been very welcome on The View until like 10 minutes ago. Here's something from 2018. What would you proclaim yourself as? Anything specifically? A socialist. Marx was a capitalist. He even wrote a book about it. Which, once again, this is something you talk about a lot. These people are not that smart.
No,
they're not.
They're very
that smart.
mediocre. No,
they're not that smart. He wrote a book with capital in the name.
Right.
So he was a capitalist.
Right.
It's like the Scientologists. They're scientific. They
That's
got
right.
science right in the name, right? Everything goes back to what you name it must be what it is. But this will really upset a lot of the MAGA base who might be flirting with Elon. Assault rifles should at minimum require a special permit where the recipient is extremely well vetted, in my opinion. To be more precise, I mean any semi-automatic gun with supersonic ammo and a large magazine. This is from 2022, as late as 2022. And, he voted for Biden in 2020. These are all things that are going to come up if he starts a third party. Now, this is happening right at a moment, and this is why I'm sure like every Tesla shareholder right now is ready to rip their hair out. This just came out this week. Tesla sales down 13.5% in the second quarter, the largest year-over-year drop in the company's history. And Tesla is poised to lose its title as the world's largest EV maker based on annual sales to Chinese automaker BYD, even though BYD does not sell cars in the U.S. market. They don't even sell cars here. And they're about to overtake Tesla just based on their sales everywhere else. BYD has reported it has sold 1 million EVs in the first half of this year, exceeding Tesla's year-to-date total of around 721,000 units. They're not just beating them, they're crushing them. They're selling 25% more cars without even having access to the American market. So that's the moment at which he decided to jeopardize his defense contracts. So already, this is from a hedge fund investment firm. Elon has gone too far. My investment firm, Invest Azoria, has decided to postpone next week's public listing of our Azoria Tesla Convexivity ETF. Our decision comes in direct response to Elon Musk's announcement that he is launching a new national political party. This creates a conflict with his full-time responsibilities as CEO of Tesla. It diverts his focus and energy away from Tesla's employees and shareholders. I'm sure if he follows through on this scheme, this will be the first of many. You're going to see a lot of hedge funds running away from Tesla stock. This is right before we went on, Trump gathered his thoughts and expressed his feelings about the breakup. I am saddened to watch Elon Musk go completely off the rails, essentially becoming a train wreck over the past 5 weeks. He even wants to start a third political party, despite the fact that they have never succeeded in the United States. The system seems not designed for them. The one thing third parties are good at is the creation of complete and total disruption and chaos. And we have enough of that with the radical left Democrats who have lost their confidence and their minds. Republicans, on the other hand, are a smooth running machine that just passed the biggest bill of its kind in the history of our country. It is a great bill, but unfortunately for Elon, it eliminates the ridiculous electric vehicle mandate, which would have forced everyone to buy an electric car in a short period of time. I have been strongly opposed to that from the very beginning. People are now allowed to buy whatever they want. Gasoline-powered hybrids, which are doing very well. That's true, actually. Or new technologies as they come about. No more EV mandate. I have campaigned on this for 2 years, and quite honestly, when Elon gave me his total and unquestioned endorsement, I asked him whether or not he knew that I was going to terminate the EV mandate. It was in every speech I made and in every conversation I had. He said he had no problems with that. I was very surprised. Additionally, Elon asked that one of his close friends run NASA, and while I thought his friend was very good, I was surprised to learn that he was a blue-blooded Democrat who had never contributed to a Republican before. Elon probably was also. I also thought it inappropriate that a very close friend of Elon, who was in the space business run by NASA, when NASA is such a big part of Elon's corporate life. My number one charge is to protect the American public. All right, you know how you can tell that Trump is heartbroken? Look how few all caps sections are in this.
Yeah.
He's hurting, man. He's hurting. He was in love. This is a man in love expressing his grief. He's trying to put a brave face on it, but he loved that man. You can really see it. This is almost coherent. That's how hurt he is. Now again, this is basically the same thing he said after Elon made the Epstein Island accusations. He's doing this because of the EV mandates and because I wouldn't hire his friend to run NASA. If he keeps it at that, and Elon keeps his SpaceX contracts, if you don't see the DOT crack down on his robo-taxis, if you don't see Trump do what Trump would do to anyone else who did this to him, Elon's tweet about Epstein probably has some evidence behind it that Trump is powerless to risk coming out, so he's going to let it go and there's no other explanation if this is all he does is bitch about it.
Well, I think it also depends on how much he actually bitches about it, how nuclear he ends up going, which I think depends on, how serious Elon is about doing this, which is an open question. Yeah, I know he did the paperwork, but, if we know Elon, he'll be on to something else in 8 to 10 months.
Maybe. He seems pretty serious about it.
He seems serious now. I'll believe it when I see it. It takes a lot to get one of these off the ground, as we know. Many have tried, many have failed, and many have lost interest.
Sure.
Now, Elon has, virtually limitless resources and a lot of reach. I mean, he's an extraordinarily rich and famous person with a very devoted following. I can't wait to see the crop of candidates that run under the America Party, if in fact it does come to fruition, which I really hope it does. I really hope it does.
Chase Oliver could not get treated any worse.
No, that's true. That's true. No, I hope it does. I mean, I say go Elon, not because I like Elon, not because I would join this party, but obviously, I mean, his issues with the big beautiful bill is that it doesn't slash the social safety net enough. I mean, that is basically
we should really try to
his issue with
broker
it.
a sit down with him and Shama.
Yeah, yeah. See, yeah, that would be a good summit. Exactly. But no, I mean, look, I hope he does. I hope he does do this. I think if you really want to, smash the two-party system, what you're going to need are to drive wedges through these major party coalitions using crisis points like this. And obviously, this big, beautiful bill is very unpopular with a lot of people for very different reasons. And if this can drive a wedge through MAGA, if this can drive a wedge through the Republican Party, then that's great. That's great. The more instability you can sow within the two-party system, the better. And so I hope he does it. I say go Elon. Go for it. I compared Elon a few days ago. He's like the T-Rex in the Jurassic Park movie. He shows up at the beginning. He's the villain. He's big and scary. And then at the end, he swoops in and he saves the day by accident because the raptors are about to eat the heroes. And he just happens to stumble into the room at that moment. And he sees the raptor and he goes and he tries to eat him. So that's, to me, this agent of chaos. He might be in the right place at the right time. I wish him best of luck with it. I hope that this drives a wedge through MAGA. I hope this ruins all of the grifters' careers. I hope this really, goes a long way to dividing Cat Turd's audience and all those people. Now, at the moment, obviously, Trump has the juice right now. So obviously, at the moment,
from
this
what
looks
I'm
like,
seeing, most of the influencer types are sticking with Daddy.
Of course, they're going to stick with Daddy for now. Of course, that's true. I mean, that's not a surprise at all. Trump, of course, has all the juice right now. As the effects of these policies within this bill make themselves known, Trump's coalition is going to become a lot weaker. And I don't know that Elon will be able to capitalize. Again, you're talking about a total lunatic. He could lose interest in 9 months.
Sure.
But I hope he doesn't. I hope he doesn't. I hope they run candidates. I hope they drive the Republican Party crazy. I hope they create all kinds of headaches and nightmares for the Republican Party going into the midterms. I think that's a great thing, and so I wish him all the luck in the world with his new venture. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
When you look at Mark Cuban jumping on there, yeah, most of these oligarchs are going to sit on the sidelines and take a wait and see attitude. But at the end of the day, would these guys love to join a kind of technocratic oligarch party where they get to run things and don't have to mix with the crude gauche red hats and pretend to like them?
Oh, sure.
Wouldn't the Bill Ackmans, the Mark Andreessens, they fucking hate Joe Rogan's audience. They love going on Joe Rogan and getting the adulation of that audience, but they don't like those people.
Right.
They don't want to mix with those people. If you offer them a party that is, Democrat, they just want another Democrat party that's not so woke. You give them like a 1995 kind of a Democratic Party, they'd be happy to go with that, which is pretty much where I think these guys are ideologically. Most of them were voting Democrat until 2024. Even Andreessen, all these guys were Democrats. Fucking Larry Fink was supporting Democrats. Like these oligarchs, this capital, they love a technocratic party that's just not insane on cultural issues. The Democrats, one of the reasons that they ran over to MAGA is the Democrats went crazy on cultural issues in another way. So at that point, between the two, well, why not go with the ones who are going to give us big tax cuts and let us run the place?
Yeah, I mean, I think the path of least resistance is always the path that they will choose. I think that's definitely true of a guy like Cuban, which explains his interest despite really going all in with the Democrats this last cycle. But then you have to ask, okay, how committed to this sort of Javier Milei style libertarianism is Elon, and are those the kind of candidates who he attracts?
Right.
That's an open question. It's really too soon to say.
He could flip back easily to 2022 Elon. That's what I'm saying.
Well, that's what I mean.
He calibrates himself like that. These oligarchs, you know what it is? They want to see themselves as an enlightened ruling class. And Trump makes that impossible. In the end, it's a marriage of convenience.
Right.
If you give them the opportunity to go back to pretending to be the enlightened, essentially liberal ruling class who get to keep all the money and throw a few crumbs to the peasants, they would prefer that. But that not being on the table, they went with Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is pretty much true. And so it remains to be seen what will happen with this, if anything. But like I said, I think if it divides the GOP, if it drives a wedge through MAGA, that would be a great thing. And so I wish him all the luck in the world. Go Elon. There you go. All right. Here we go. Shelvin Knight says, I've been in a coma since 2014. What I miss? Haha. Good one, Shelvin. Zayshawn Qureshi, thanks for the $9.99 super sticker. Appreciate that very much. Gonna have to refresh this screen in order to reload these. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. All right, I'll go to some Rumble rants here. Failing to warn and respond to natural disasters seems to be a feature, not a bug. With that in mind, you're doing a heck of a job, Brownie. Thanks, Killer Hinton. Appreciate that. Yes, I Am the Owl says, did you guys see the horrible news video where in the background some American contractor in Gaza is overheard shooting a civilian waiting for food, and one yells, hell yeah, boy, I got one. So beyond depraved. I did see that.
No, I didn't see that. You saw that?
Yep, I did see that one. Yes, I did. Horrible stuff, obviously.
Oof.
Professor Brown note, look at the terrible federal services. The solution is to privatize. That's why we're announcing another $100 trillion in tax cuts. It'll be beautiful. Thank you, Professor Brown note. Trump is the first to admit when he makes a mistake, but he simply never does. Yeah, good one. EO Shushbly, thank you for that. Fat Not So Fat says, Elon getting his subsidies removed by Doge could be peak irony. You would think a CEO that relies on government money would stay out of politics. Good one. Thank you. Good point. Jay Bell says, Uvalde, now this. I'm sensing a theme. in Texas. Fat Not So Fat, thanks for the 199. Says BlackRock removed their Ukraine redevelopment fund. Thank you, Fat Not So Fat. Reverend Edmund Balela says you can pray for Texas and be furious at the oligarchy for underfunding weather stations. Of course, absolutely, 100%, 100%. Okay, what do we got here? Got that one. Okay, perfect. All right, we will move right on along here. A little bit of business to take care of before segment number 3. We are at 808 likes. Man, we're at 2641 in the YouTube chat. Yeah, 25. So thanks, everybody, for being here. Please smash that like button. Please smash that subscribe button over here on YouTube and that follow button over on Rumble. 1,300 strong in the Rumble chat. Great crowd in here this evening. All right, folks, so just as we were signing off on Thursday, the big, beautiful bill passed. And on the 4th of July, Donald Trump gave about a 23-minute speech boasting about the passage of this historic piece of legislation. We're going to listen to a couple minutes worth of that right now.
We're going to make official the greatest victory yet when I signed the one big, beautiful bill. And before I start, I want to tell you that I've never seen people so happy in our country because of that. Because
really?
So many different groups of people are being taken care of, the military and civilians of all types, jobs of all types. We're adding things like the biggest tax cut in the history of our country, child tax credits. So many things are being added that we wouldn't even have time to discuss them. When we were doing it, John Thune and Mike Johnson right there, I see Mike, what a job they've done. What a job they've done. But, you know, it was supposed to be in 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 different bills. And I was on one of the fake news shows, and I said, let's do it in one beautiful, big, we want one big, beautiful bill.
There you go.
I said that to this news.
One big, beautiful. Hey, I said, let's do it one beautiful bill, big. No, that's not one big bill, beautiful. No, that's it. One big, beautiful bill.
Newscaster. And I think a lot of the congressmen and senators were watching, and they said, let's name the bill that, the one big, beautiful bill. And that's what we did. And what we've done is put everything into one bill. It's never happened before. It's the biggest bill of its type in history. We've never had anything like that before. Nothing like that they thought would be possible to get passed. And actually, I liked it because we had so much in there that no matter who you are, there was something in that bill that would make your congressman or your senator or your congresswoman, much more importantly, raise their hand and support. Right, Lisa? So
Lisa
that was something, and it
Lisa,
was really
you almost
something
fucked
special.
me on that, Lisa.
So the American people gave us a historic mandate in November. We won everything. We won the swing states, all 7 swing states. We won every one. That rarely happens. We won the popular vote. We won the districts, 2,750 to 505. That's why when you look at a map, it's all red, a little blue on each end, but it's all red. And by the way, red means Republican, just in case.
Yes, we know that.
But we made promises, and it's really promises made, promises kept, and we've kept them. This is a triumph of democracy on the birthday of democracy. And I have to say that the people are happy. They're happy. And I listened to a broadcast.
Okay,
on
well, the people, I hate to tell you this, according to the polls anyway, are not only are they not happy, they're quite unhappy with this bill. Every poll is against Trump's big, beautiful bill, even among Republican voters. So that's the spread. That's sort of an aggregate of recent polls. Washington Post, -19. Pew, -20. Fox, -21. Quinnipiac, -26. KFF, -29. Yeah, those are absolutely brutal numbers.
Look at
for this
Melania.
bill.
You tell me any country on earth where you could start out doing softcore porn and wind up standing on the balcony of the White House as the first lady. This is a land of opportunity. We want to keep it that way, folks.
That's what the one big, beautiful bill is for. So here's Elizabeth Landers saying, I asked several Republican members after the passage of the tax cut and spending bill about the CBO analysis, the Congressional Budget Office, that millions of Americans will lose health insurance because of provisions in the legislation. Well, she tried to rain on their parade with some facts and information, but they were just too high off the fumes of having passed this bill. So here she is trying to talk some sense into some of these people.
Office estimates that a number of Americans will be kicked off of their health insurance over the course of a decade. Listen to an exchange that I had with a Republican member when I asked him about that possibility.
What about the Congressional Budget Office score, though, that there could be 11 million, 12 million Americans who lose their health care because of this?
Number, and it's the amount of times the CBO has been right. Oh, here it is. They're never right.
That was something that I heard from several Republicans. They do not trust the Congressional Budget Office. That is a nonpartisan analysis organization.
So they are never right. Well, here is the track record of the CBO. So it doesn't look like there are two lines there because, in fact, they are right pretty often. But here you can see the divergence, the difference between the CBO's and the administration's budget year projections of revenues and actual amounts. So as you can see there, they've got a pretty
spot on,
pretty close record, pretty close record. Here is their margin of error year by year. Now the recession lines are those gray lines. So you could see obviously just after 2000, 2001, that's 9/11, which yielded a greater margin of error. Obviously, the 2009 financial crisis, a greater margin of error. And then 2020, COVID and all of the chaos coming out of COVID led to a greater margin of error in those years. Even in those years, it wasn't north of 4 points. But outside a cataclysmic event like that happening, they've been within 2 points of accuracy. So, in other words, no, they are not never right. This is the thing. These people, they just lie. They just make shit up.
They just lie.
Oh, they're never right. By never, we mean they're almost always right within 2 points, except for when there's a cataclysmic, unforeseen event like 9/11, a pandemic, or a market crash. Yeah.
Yeah, because their target audience just wants them to feed rage bait. Right. And they're not going to look into it. They don't care. No, you see, the CBO's never right.
They're never right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they don't want
just
to
say they're never
they
right.
Don't care.
Right.
Just say it.
Right. Exactly. Well, it's funny because, you know, we saw that the polling was bad on the big, beautiful bill before these cowards fell in line. And here are some of these same cowards talking about what a horrible bill this is just a week ago.
What they did is unconscionable. What they did to our bill was unconscionable. I'll vote against it here, and I'll vote against it on the floor.
Spoiler alert, you voted for it.
You're going to hear a lot about the tax cuts, but the deficit, nobody's talking about the deficit. Nobody. I got it. The tax cuts are important. We are going to get the tax cuts done in some fashion. But we cannot saddle our children and our grandchildren with an exploding national debt.
Spoiler alert again, that same guy voted for it.
Do I like this bill? No, because I tried to take care of Alaska's interests. But I know that in many parts of the country, there are Americans that are not going to be advantaged by this bill.
She voted for it as well. These people are all useless cowards. These are all Pramila Jayapals. Yeah, yep. That's Murkowski. These are all the Pramila Jayapals and the AOCs of the Republican Party. They're just useless cowards. All of them. All of them. Even Massey to some extent, because he voted to advance the bill to the floor. He voted to advance it. And then he turned around and voted no on it. But yeah, even he.
And why
even
even do that? They're primarying you.
They're primarying you. Right. You're fucked anyway. Right. Exactly. Right. Like once you decide to cross Trump that publicly and he starts primarying you, at that point, you got to hope that you have enough support for what you actually believe in to put you over the top in that primary. Like to just go back and pussyfoot, no, I'm going to vote to advance it, but then vote against it. That shows the kind of weakness that gets you in trouble with your base. Because now,
like clearly Massey is a choir boy. Because if he was not, AIPAC would have leaked shit by now.
Oh yeah, of course.
So what do they have?
That guy's clean.
What leverage do they have on you?
Yeah, no, that guy is clean as a whistle, no doubt. So here's a guy here Republican Troy Nels when I asked the same question about Americans losing health care. So here is Elizabeth Lander. She posts this tweet. So here is an exchange with Troy Nels from Texas.
Score and the idea that 11 million, 12 million Americans may lose health insurance.
Good optics there with the cigar in the hand, talking about how you just took people's health insurance away. And I don't know what those bandages are on his hands. I heard there was some sort of double fisting accident with Benny Johnson, but I can't confirm that. I mean, this would be evidence of that, but I don't know that for sure. I don't know why else he would have bandages on both hands.
I don't have any faith and confidence in the CBO. They're scoring. They're wrong half the damn time. I don't give any. No,
So you're
I'm not worried about the CBO.
You're not worried at all that Americans may lose their health care.
Oh, well, just some Americans that aren't Americans, and that is the illegals. Why should illegals be on Medicare? Shouldn't have it. We did a great job with it all. We did a great job. I appreciate it. The American people spoke. The American people spoke, and the elected representatives spoke today. And what did we do? We supported and passed this one big, beautiful bill. So now you got to accept it and absorb it because it's the right thing to do for the American people.
No, I wasn't injured. My job around here is to wipe Donald Trump's ass. I don't like to get it on my palms.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, it fucks up the taste of the cigar. Yeah. So I gotta be very, very conscious of that. Turns out though, even Troy Nels was promising that they weren't going to touch Medicare and Medicaid just months ago. So this is Social Security Works made this video, which then got picked up by the Humanitarian. Flashback to January 16th. Here is a guy, chasing him down on the Capitol steps here, asking him, hey, you're going to cut Medicare and Medicaid in this budget bill.
Congressman, hoping you could take this pledge to stand with President Trump against cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Yeah.
So if
we support President Trump, they're not going to touch that.
In the reporting that I've seen, there's $2.3 trillion in Medicaid cuts and $500 billion in Medicare cuts as part of the reconciliation package. If that were to move forward,
You're talking about Medicaid now. We're talking about Social Security. Social Security has been part of reconciliation. You know that.
I do know that.
Okay, but Medicare, I'm sure there's going to be conversations about the Medicare.
About Medicare and Medicaid. So
Medicaid specifically, but
if there's cuts to Medicare, against those cuts.
Well, we got to look and see what kind of cuts are there. Should people be getting Medicare and that are able to go out and work? Should they?
I love how they go from, no, we're not touching it. We're not touching it. To, yeah, we're taking it away from the illegals. To, we'll talk about it because really, do you need it? If you're able to work, should you get it? So it goes from, no, we're not touching it. We're touching it for the illegals. And then, hey, if you really don't need it, should you have it?
Yes, because it's an earned benefit. Medicaid is different.
I understand. These conversations that are going to be taking place over the next 30 to 60 days, and I think we are going to find a good bill under reconciliation that the American people can support.
But and
it also can pass.
And the American people are soundly against all cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So I'm not sure that you could find a bill that has support with us.
We've got to find a way to save our country. That's what we do. We have to find a way to save our country.
So are you saying that you save our country by cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid?
Remember, I just said to you just a minute ago, you ain't touching Social Security. It's not part of reconciliation, and you know that.
So just Medicare and Medicaid.
Again, we got to look at everything, but they're not talking about that. That sounds like, are you a Democrat? You sound like a Democrat talking point here right now.
My name is Alex Lawson. I'm with Social Security Works. So I'm just, last question, and thanks for your forthcomingness.
Sure.
Can you just tell me how taking people's health care away lowers the price of groceries?
Come on.
Have a great day, Congressman.
Now that guy, it took that guy 2.5 minutes to tell the guy to fuck himself. This guy kind of cut more to the chase here. So here is Tennessee's Tim Burchett being asked about Medicaid cuts.
Die because of the cuts.
They're not going to die. Quit lying, dude. Why don't you get off my ass?
That is the real story, isn't it?
It is not the
Billionaires
real
are getting tax breaks, poor people getting health care
Bad
cuts.
about lying, but you're getting paid to lie.
Where's the lie, sir?
It's a lie. Show me where 17 million people are going to die.
Reputable sources have reported that when you knock people off of Medicaid, when you deny people health care, sir, this is not rocket science. If you deny health care to people, they die.
it's also, if they would get off their ass and get a job, you would probably.
So the puritanical notion that if you don't work, you don't eat doesn't work when there's an unemployment rate, sir.
Yep. That guy wasn't shy about it at all. Now, here's what makes this bill especially evil. And here's, how you could see, just what liars these people are and how cynical they are. Tax cuts now, benefit cuts later, the timeline in the Republican mega bill. So Republicans deferred some of their most painful spending cuts until after the midterm election. So the tax cuts are going to take place immediately, starting this tax year, 2025. The safety net cuts, as you look, food stamp work requirements potentially in 2025. New rules on health insurance start in 2026. Medicaid work requirements, December 31st, 2026 for most states. So that would be after the midterms. But then obviously the real whopper, the really devastating impact would be felt starting in 2028, because that is where the Medicaid and food stamp funding changes set in. And so you're going to feel some pain before the midterms, but most of it will be after. So a little bit of a more detailed breakdown on that. Food stamp work requirements. Many adults with children 14 or older must obtain work in order to qualify for aid. New rules for health insurance. So this is restrictions to qualify for subsidies and an end to automatic renewal. That will start in 2026. So some people are going to feel some pain there. They're going to make it a lot harder to qualify for ACA subsidies. They're going to create a lot more paperwork, a lot more red tape to cut through, and your policy will not automatically renew year to year, which means you're going to have to do that paperwork all over again every year. Medicaid work requirements. Many adults with children 14 or older must obtain work in order to qualify for aid. And then here's the big one, the reduction in the amount of federal funding states can use in support of their Medicaid programs. That starts in 2028. So what they're trying to do is they're going to try to hold the worst of the pain until after the midterms. And that's how you know what liars these people are.
Right.
Because they're not implementing the policy until after the midterms. They're not implementing the worst parts of these policies until after the midterms. If this was all great, why wouldn't they implement it all on an expedited timeline? Because they know that this is going to fuck people over.
Yeah,
and they know
let JD explain that. He looks. You see that meme with him, like the big bearded baby. He's not going to win anyway.
He's not going to win anyway. That guy's a total stiff. He's going to lose anyway, so let him deal with it. No, I thought this exact same thing. Like, they're really willing to just fuck JD Vance in 2028. But as you said, I don't think they really care. They're like, you know what? This is our chance to do this. They want to minimize the midterm damage because they would like to be able to perhaps do more. They figure, hey, if we could pull out a miracle in the midterms and, keep some legislative pull, maybe we could do another big, beautiful bill in a couple of years, right?
We might be able to legalize organ donation for profit.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Who knows what they'll be up to by then. But the fact that they're hiding this just shows you that, yes, they have ill intentions. They know they have ill intentions. They know this is going to be absolutely devastating for people, and they're going to try to delay the worst of this until after people vote in the midterms, which is why, if you're a Democrat, you really have to stay on message for a change. And message on these Medicaid cuts exclusively, pretty much, because the fact that the worst of them don't happen until a year after the midterms, it gives the Republicans time to find some weird culture war issue that they can try and run on. But yeah, man, I mean, when you look, you got these guys. This just signals such arrogance to be out there with a fucking cigar, bragging about how you're taking away health care. Oh, Americans who are not Americans, it's just the illegals. No, it is not. No, it is not just for illegal immigrants. And by the way, by 2028, aren't you going to have all the illegal immigrants out? I thought we're not going to have illegal immigrants here anymore by the time you cut
they're all
Medicaid.
going to be gone by then.
Right. So why are you cutting Medicaid in 2028 if your mass deportations will be over by then? If it's only for illegal immigrants.
Yeah, I mean, James Carville, this kind of made the rounds. He did an interview, and not that he's the best barometer for predicting political trends, this is pretty much on track with what we've been saying, though. You just Democrats, all they got to do is play possum right now. In 6 weeks, 6 weeks, Republican Party's gonna fall apart.
Right.
Now, yeah, man. You see what just happened tragically with this flood? A lot more things like that are gonna happen. It's gonna get to the point. Look, you always have your hardcore supporters where it would not matter if they are that partisan and that hypnotized into partisanship. It doesn't matter. They're gonna stick to the party. You don't win elections on those people. You got to swing over a lot of independents to really get a mandate. As the impacts of these policies really start to be felt, look at it, we didn't even get to it. There was too much news. Look at what's happening with these trade deals. He says, what, August 1st, any country they don't have a trade deal with, those Liberation Day tariffs are going to snap into place. You already have inflation crushing people. Are they going to be happy about paying higher prices for all the things? Even with Vietnam, they made a deal. Vietnam's got a 20% tariff. Guess what? You're paying that. When you buy shoes that are made in Vietnam, you're going to pay 20% more. What do you think? Vietnam's going to pay it? You're going to pay it. When that locks into place for all these other products, and you have the impact of these Doge cuts striking in different departments, you're going to have more and more disasters. Yeah, I don't know 4 to 6 weeks, but I think Carville's right overall in his theory that this is, look, already you can't even get Republicans on board with this bill.
Right.
After all the propagandizing, all the pushing, the big July 4th balcony spectacle, you still can't get Republicans to go along with this? Nah.
No, I mean, look, his strategy from a cynical standpoint is probably the right one, especially since the Democrats are really not capable of making a case for themselves. Like, they cannot make an affirmative case for themselves.
That's the thing.
So all they can really do is hope the Republicans self-destruct. You know, we heard a lot of people, we heard quite a few Democrats cry about what a terrible bill this is once it passed. You know, maybe the week before this bill passed would have been a great week to go out and have rallies and have organizing events, pressuring swing votes in Congress on the Republican side not to vote for it. No, instead, what did they do? They spent the week calling Zohran Mamdani an anti-Semite. Right.
I was just going to say, what's going on with the Democrats is their ongoing war with the young and the energetic and the passionate wing of their party. The next generation.
Yeah.
Look, we are
figuring out how to rat fuck the rising star in their party. That's how they spent the week before this vote.
Right. Hey, we're not fans of AOC and all of these people. Do they more closely represent where the center of gravity has shifted on the left over the last several decades, whatever their failings and hypocrisies? Yeah, of course they do. And this has been going on since 2016, when that wing of the party, had the unlikely champion of an old man from the New Deal era leading it. They have been at war with this wing, and now really this is the final battle because, time catches up, man. These people are fucking dying.
Right.
They're dying.
Literally.
Yes, the future is with the Mondanis, the AOCs, but they just will not let go of that baton, man. They are going to go down trying to do as much damage to any seeding of the future to a more left coalition. These are not radicals. These are not radicals. AOC voted for increased ICE funding. Most of the squad did. They voted for these aid packages for Ukraine. There are no radicals. That's too much for them. Anything that goes outside the death grip of Clintonian centrism is anathema. It is a bigger threat to them than the Republicans, and we see they fight that in a way they never fight Republicans. And they're going to keep doing it, even as time makes it inevitable that they lose.
Yep, 100%. Richard Hughes, thanks for the $6.99, says, with being as dialed in as you guys are with current events Any stories of ruining family dinner events with correcting people with true facts? Well, I don't go to family dinner events, so I don't have that problem. I don't go to events. I'm not an events guy. Yeah.
Listen, man, I spend every Christmas with a very dear family to me that is as lib gets, and I bite my tongue through that whole evening because I don't want to fuck things up for anybody, man. Like you should, if you're gonna do that, just don't go.
Right.
You gotta control yourself, man.
Yeah. I mean, I don't not go to events because of that. I generally prefer not to go to events. Andy Gardner, thanks for the $5. I was just joking about cat turd. You didn't need to make me cry. I'm just kidding. I agree. X is for moderate gossip. No, I did see something about how people are complaining about Grok. I don't know why, but I didn't look into it the way I normally would. H1B1 Visa political party. There you go. Thanks, Fat Not So Fat. Dorian Marquis says, "Hey, Russ, remember how uncool it was to wear a Thriller jacket after 1984? Yeah, that's Elon. Trump and the MAGA craze. Please exit stage left." Thank you for that. Race Car, thanks for the $20, says, "I'd give Tesla brand another chance if Musk can start a third party." There you go. John N., love from Florida. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Thank you, John N. Appreciate that very much. Dedamod says, "Mark Levin announced Zoran, Hamas, and anti-Semites are responsible for the tragedy in Texas." EO shush, they could have used their 22-foot bootstraps. That's right. There isn't no way to get these until something like this happens because they think the infrastructure that keeps civil society grows on trees. Well, yeah, people take... Well, that is a good point, and I actually meant to make that point in the segment. And this is part of why the sensationalism is so destructive in this context, because... yeah, you see Elon on stage waving the chainsaw around. You think, yeah, we're going to trim the fat. People literally, and it's natural to do this because if you're not familiar with the intricacies of government systems, then why would you think about it this deeply? But people literally just take for granted that, oh yeah, if there's a weather emergency, I'm going to get the alert on my phone. Like they just kind of take for granted that that's going to happen. When actually, no, in order for that alert to get to your phone, that requires people being staffed at the proper places, communicating with each other. Like that stuff is not just automatic, It does require a certain investments, So yes, that's a good point. Fellas, I live in this area of Texas. Every summer I return from trips to other states and need to adjust my eyes to our shitty infrastructure. This tragedy sucks in every direction. Well, God bless Louis de la Cruz.
Yeah, man, dude. When I was in New Orleans, I guess that was last year, right? When I was in New Orleans, I did a little stream from Magazine Street. That's the nice part of town. And I had Europeans on the stream going, "What is that? The third world?" That's the nice part of town in New Orleans. You go to the other side of town, the fucking asphalt is worn back down to the dirt.
Yep, I believe it. All right, let's move right on along to Shylockgate, as we'll call this.
Yes, in which our theater background and our mob New York tour background is going to come in handy. Both of those things come into play here. Now, we sometimes get accused of having Trump derangement syndrome, but we always try to be fair here, as I hope you will agree by the end of this, because I'm going to have to defend Trump on this one, to be honest with you. So here he is talking about the Shylock bankers.
President, I wanted to ask you about...
Oh, whoops. That's the later one.
What I said, not going to help. But if you love them or if you love somebody that you're leaving it to, think of that. No death tax, no estate tax, no going to the banks and borrowing from, in some cases, a fine banker, and in some cases, Shylocks and bad people. But they took away a lot of family. They destroyed a lot of families, but we did the opposite. So just remember, to me, it's so important, and it was mostly important for...
Okay. All right. So let the meltdown begin. So here's Brian Krasenstein. Is Trump anti-Semitic or just an idiot? Shylock is a fictional character in William Shakespeare's play The Merchant of Venice. A Venetian Jewish moneylender, Shylock is the play's principal villain. His defeat and forced conversion to Christianity form the climax of the story. The Nazis used Shylock for their propaganda. Shortly after Kristallnacht in 1938, the German radio had broadcast a production of The Merchant of Venice to reinforce stereotypes. Productions of the play followed in Lubeck, 1938, Berlin, 1940, and elsewhere within Nazi-occupied territory. What Krasenstein doesn't tell you there is that actually the Nazis made cuts and alterations to the play because they found it too sympathetic to Shylock, and it has long been a debate whether The Merchant of Venice is kind of ahead of its time in portraying the anti-Semitism that the protagonist Shylock faces as something that drives him to take the actions that he takes, making it a kind of sympathetic portrayal, or whether it's anti-Semitic. But yes, I mean, the character, as you can see from this 1860s portrayal, has often been used as an anti-Semitic trope. But the idea that everyone has understood Shylock to be verboten, The Merchant of Venice was produced with Al Pacino in Hollywood, not the least Zionist place in the world, in 2004. Okay, 2004. They still produce The Merchant of Venice. So the idea that it's just understood that this is an anti-Semitic play, it's a source of a lot of debate. But in terms of linguistic drift and what Shylock means to most people, and whether most people who use the term would even know where that term comes from, we'll address that a little later. So the ADL responds to this. The term Shylock evokes a centuries-old anti-Semitic trope about Jews and greed that is extremely offensive and dangerous. President Trump's use of the term is very troubling and irresponsible. It underscores how lies and conspiracies about Jews remain deeply entrenched in our country. Words from our leaders matter, and we expect more from the President of the United States.
I think he made it up to you guys.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. I'd say so, which is pretty much what Mehdi Hassan thinks. Yeah. Two things to note. ADL labels Trump's Shylock remark only troubling and irresponsible, not anti-Semitic. Apparently, charges of anti-Semitic are only for Israel critics. 2, not a word from Jonathan Greenblatt yet. He's too busy smearing brown folks like me to say anything. Hey, when he's right, he's right. David Grossman, imagine the reaction if Mamdani used the term Shylock. Yes, I would imagine the ADL would have a much less measured reaction if Mamdani used the term Shylock. No doubt. Jerry Nadler, who surprisingly, to my surprise, one of the few New York reps who has actually endorsed Mamdani. The term Shylock is one of the most recognizable anti-Semitic slurs in the English language. It's a centuries-old trope that has fueled discrimination, hatred, and violence against Jews for generations. I condemn Donald Trump's dangerous use of this blatantly anti-Semitic slur and his long history of trafficking in anti-Semitic tropes. Now he goes on, but yeah, I mean, Trump, everyone's forgotten this now, 2016, he tweeted this out with Hillary in front of the money with the Star of David, most corrupt candidate ever. And he has a long history of telling American Jews, I've done a lot for your country, or referring to his ambassador to Israel as your ambassador. Now, to be fair, Donald Trump's not the most curious and scholarly guy, and Zionists do everything they can to blur that distinction. But this is pretty typical of how he talks to Jews about Israel. No president has done more for Israel than I have. Somewhat surprisingly, however, our wonderful evangelicals are far more appreciative of this than the people of the Jewish faith, especially those living in the U.S. Those living in Israel, though, are a different story. Highest approval rating in the world, could easily be PM. U.S. Jews have to get their act together and appreciate what they have in Israel before it is too late. So, yeah, man, look, I've long said this. Donald Trump, in my opinion, from my observation, he does not like Jews. He does not like Jews. He likes the money they give him. He likes the money that Miriam Adelson gives him. Does Donald Trump, in offhanded ways, display a basic dislike for Jewish people? Yeah, I think so. I think that's a fair observation. Doesn't mean that's where his use of that term was coming from, which again we'll address. So John Podderetz responding to Nadler. I condemn your endorsement of an anti-Semitic mayoral candidate, which you did because you are a pusillanimous coward at best. Trump said Shylock the same week he destroyed Iran's nuclear program. What have you ever done for the Jews, Jerry, except eat too much deli?
Jesus.
Wow, but more to the point, Trump bombed Iran. He can say Shylock 100 times a day forever, as far as I'm concerned.
It's not really about the anti-Semitism, right?
Yeah, giving away the game a little bit there. Giving away the game. You can do whatever you want as long as you do whatever Israel wants.
Right.
Michael Tracy quote tweeted that on the 4th of July. Perfect tweet. God bless America. And Imran Siddiqui says the game has been revealed. Hear, hear, my friend. Hear, hear. Now, Trump was asked about his use of that term by reporters. This is what he said.
I wanted to ask you about one of the words you used during your speech, Shylocks. That's widely viewed as an anti-Semitic phrase. Do you intend for that word to be used?
No, I've never heard it that way. To me, a Shylock is somebody that's a money lender at high rates. I've never heard it that way. You view it differently than me. I've never heard that. Go ahead. Anything else?
Do I look like I read Shakespeare? And what are you talking about?
I mean, I do have one of the folios at home, I must admit. All right, so he's not.
But Iago was a good guy.
Iago is probably the most misunderstood character in literature, in my opinion. He's not the first president to do that. Well, maybe the first president, but Vice President to be Joe Biden used the term Shylock in a speech. Quote, people would come to Bo and talk about what was happening to them at home in terms of foreclosures, in terms of bad loans that were being, these Shylocks who took advantage of these women and men while overseas. Now, Joe Biden did have a long history of saying racist shit and blaming it on a weirdly racist stutter from his childhood. But I don't even think that he necessarily meant it that way any more than Donald Trump did. Now, this might partly be because I grew up a few miles from where Donald Trump did. I always say one of the great mysteries of Donald Trump to me is he grew up to the manor born, but he talks like a guy from Queens. He talks like a guy from my neighborhood. I am Jewish, and having grown up in an Italian neighborhood, I don't think it was until I went to college and took theater history, and you had to take Shakespeare as part of that, that I understood Shylock that way. Donald Trump, the era that he was in real estate, you could not be in real estate in New York and not deal with the mafia. He absolutely has mob connections. Again, you couldn't put up a popsicle stand in New York in the 70s and 80s in the era when he was a really active developer and not deal with the mob. I would imagine that it was through his work in construction that he was exposed to that term. Here are some mobsters and mob documentarians using that term as it would be used by mobsters.
Money is one of the most lucrative businesses for mobsters, even to this.
Let's take that back.
Shylock and money is one of the most lucrative businesses for mobsters, even to this day. Mobsters like Tommy Bilotti, Joe Watts, and Roy DeMeo were known for making money through loaning money out on the street. The term Shylock just means that you loan out money at a huge interest rate. The way it works is, let's say a customer wants to borrow $1,000. The mob guy might say he'll loan it at 2 points. What that means is that you have to pay a weekly amount, which is 2% of the loan on a weekly basis.
Okay. Here's Michael Franzese, who's getting a lot of love from us this week. He has a mob cast that's pretty good, along with Sammy the Bull. Kind of like Sammy the Bull's better, but he's got a good show.
It had a decent amount of money, would put money out on the
But
street.
how do you keep track of all the money on the street, Michael? Do you put it in a book?
No, I didn't put it in a book. It was all in my head. Everything I had was in my head. And, you know, there was two ways that I Shylocked. If it was a business guy, obviously I'd give it to him. Whenever I gave a guy money, it was always in business. It was always with the eye that I'd one day be his partner.
So, in reality, do you think that any of these guys, these mob guys who regularly use the term Shylock as the kind of preferred term for a loan shark, knew that that term came from a Shakespeare play about a Jewish moneylender? It started that way. That's where it came from. But in the era and in the milieu in which Donald Trump grew up, in the place where I grew up, Shylock would have been understood exactly the way he said he understood it. I didn't even know that it had those connotations. It's an example of, we have a lot of words like that. There's been a crusade that I have been opposed to over the last decade or so to go interrogate the origins of words in order to scrub all words with offensive origins from the English language, which I think is a quixotic battle. But that's what happened with the term Shylock for people within certain settings. More sophisticated, educated people, yes, they know where it comes from. Donald Trump has never been accused of being a sophisticated, educated person. I tend to believe, based on his background, that he didn't even make that connection.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. It's more in this context. This is Real Mob Stories channel, by the way. We should shout them out too. So go check out that channel, Real Mob Stories from there. Yeah, that's probably where he learned it, probably where he knows it from. Like you said, that's the water in which he swims. You know, he's not a Shakespeare scholar. But I do think, I think part of the reason why people jumped on it too is because I think, generally speaking, yeah, he does have this like casual anti-Semitism about him. I remember Max Blumenthal, when we interviewed him, I think it was the first or second time we ever interviewed him, he said something to the effect of, I'm going to be paraphrasing it a little bit, but he said, you know, Trump kind of views, you know, Jews, especially American Jews, in this sort of like casual anti-Semitic way where like, yeah, they're the pains in the ass that you got to deal with in order to get what you want, right? And that's the way I think he sees it. You know, do I think it's like vitriolic and hateful? No, I think he's, you know, it's sort of casual in that sense, sort of nonchalant and sort of cavalier. And I think that's probably where some of that pushback comes from. But yeah, I mean, the ADL probably figured with that statement, well, we have to say something. If we don't say anything, it's too obvious. So we'll say something. Hey, that's very troubling. Yeah, we'll say something milquetoast that he'll ignore and forget about it. We'll move on. We'll move on. But it was a funny choice of words given the events of the past couple of years and his closeness to Israel, to see him use the term Shylock. You know how we'll know? We'll know, you know, the final verdict, I suppose, will be rendered tomorrow when Netanyahu comes to town. If Netanyahu brings it up, if he busts his balls over it, then we'll know. Then we'll know.
That should be our first production. We should do the Merchant of Venice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Do the Merchant of Venice. Yeah. All right, Jake, do you got the patron scroll for us? If you're there, Jake, thank you very much. Perfect. Beautiful. All right, folks. Well, hey, if you like what we do here and you want to help us do more of it, by far the best way to help is to become a member at dudissidents.com/Patreon, dudissidents.com/Substack, dudissidents.com/locals. All of our member sites, membership starts at $5 a month. You get all kinds of perks with your membership. They include call-in access to every post-show Q&A, which take place every Sunday night over on Rumble. Tonight is Sunday, so we will be doing a Q&A after the show this evening. All are welcome to watch. Paid members are welcome to call in, so that's a nice perk. You also get post-games once a month where we do extra content and take calls from patrons exclusively for patrons. Film Club episodes once a month. You also get every episode that we do emailed to you ad-free the day after they air online. So if you miss a show and you want to watch one back with no ad interruptions, we send you a link to the ad-free replay of every live stream the day after it airs. It helps tremendously to keep the project going. Super important. We could not do this without our members. Our members are, of course, the backbone of the show. You also get your name up in lights here on the show scroll, which is an indicator that you are one of the real ones who support independent media. So thank you all very much for your support. We had a bunch of people sign up to our Substack newsletter. So that's dudissidents.com/Substack. Later this month, we are bringing on a segment producer, which is going to free time up for Russ and myself to focus on some different aspects of the project. Russ will be focusing more on video essays. I'll be focusing more on the online magazine component. That online magazine will go through Substack. So if you go to dudissidents.substack.com, even if you don't sign up as a paid member, you could sign up for free, and you'll have all of that content sent to you later this month when we bring those features online. So that is pretty exciting stuff. One other project that we have going is, of course, the Misty Winston Show, which airs every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern over on Rumble, and then segments are clipped throughout the week for both YouTube and Rumble. So please go to our Rumble channel and smash that follow button. If you're watching now, we got 1,400 over on Rumble. Smash that follow button so that you can watch the Misty Winston Show live every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Okay. Furrow Screen Fire Dancer says, in your time zone currently, gents. May call in later to give my remarks on the Blue Jays LA Angels game. Spoiler alert, I support Russell's stance on organized sports. Oh, you're at the Blue Jays game. That's right. You're in Toronto. Well, welcome to this side of the pond, Furrow Screen.
Welcome.
Welcome. Professor Brown Note says, the Murica Party, the atomic wedgie between the duopoly ass cheeks. Thank you, Professor Brown Note. Appreciate that. Yo, shush, if you watch TikTok, it's simple, mostly positive brain-numbing stuff. You watch the X Reels, and it's foreigners, blacks and whites, fights and murders on every corner, and you better get ready for the race war. Thank you, Yo, shush. Kemen says, the mooch needs to be on your show. He uses profanity freely and can read some super chats in a threatening way. Yes, that would be funny. That would be funny. That would be actually pretty fun to have him on. He might even do it. You know, who knows?
You never know.
Never know. Seems like a fun-loving guy. $1 Million Trooper says Trump is heartbroken about Elon as Vincent Gallo was that the Bills lost Super Bowl 25. Missed the first hour of your show watching Buffalo 66. And he went to the can for 5 years. Snoop Sean says Rabbi Shmuley is endorsing the American Party because Democrats and Republicans are anti-Semitic. Thank you, Snoop Sean. Appreciate that very much. All right, what do we got over here? Ron McKinnon says, Ross Doodhat, you'd like the human race to endure, right? Right. Peter Thiel, I'm thinking. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ron McKinnon. Appreciate that very much. Okay, let's take a quick break here for a word. Oh, do I have his stuff loaded in, or do I have to do that here? Oh yeah, no, here it is. All right, folks. So before we continue on the show, I do want to talk to you a little bit about John Coa. Just a moment of your time. John Coa is one of our dissident sponsors, and he has a new single out called Just a Little Off the Rails. So for those familiar with John's work, this is the latest preview from his upcoming album. The foundation of these tracks began as raw live acoustic performances captured a few years ago. Initially, John considered releasing just those solo acoustic versions, but he found it easier to make the art than to put it out. Now these tracks are seeing the light of day for the first time in an upcoming album called A to Z, and Just a Little Off the Rails is the first single. It's an autobiographical song with lyrics that may hit home for a lot of people. It's a great song. We've played it a few times on the show before, so go to John Coa's Spotify page and give it a listen. You can find the links to all of his socials, including his Apple Music and his Spotify, at dudissidents.com/Coa. So that's dudissidents.com/Coa. All righty. So we are going to move right on along here. So Donald Trump had what was a pretty good weekend for his presidency until, of course, the Texas flood happened. But one of the sort of blemishes, if you will, on it was that he was very, very disappointed by his phone call with Russia's Vladimir Putin as yet another attempt to move towards a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine seems to have come and gone quite fruitlessly. So here he is.
Are you still speaking? Are you speaking to Zelensky tomorrow? And what are you hoping?
I'm speaking to President Zelensky tomorrow, early in the morning, and I'm very disappointed with the conversation I had today with President Putin because I don't think he's there. I don't think he's there, and I'm very disappointed. Well, it's not. I'm just saying, I don't think he's looking to stop, and that's too bad.
Yeah, that is too bad, I would say. No deal. Trump says he's not happy and didn't make any progress in yesterday's phone call with Putin. Here he is the next morning.
It was
the
a
next
pretty
evening,
long
rather.
call. We talked about a lot of things, including Iran, and we also talked about, as you know, the war with Ukraine. And I'm not happy about that. I'm not happy about that. No, I didn't make any progress with him today at all.
Well, that is refreshingly honest, I suppose. Russia pummels Kiev with drones and missiles after Putin-Trump call. So this seems like Putin kind of adding insult to injury here, making a point to ramp up his campaign after that quote-unquote disappointing call with Donald Trump. Heavy smoke choked central Kiev on Friday after Russia launched its biggest aerial assault in its war against Ukraine, as Russian President Vladimir Putin showed no indication of wanting to end hostilities after a conversation with President Donald Trump. Russian forces pummeled Ukraine with 539 drones and 11 missiles, with the main direction of the strike targeting Kiev, Ukraine's Air Force said in a statement. That barrage surpassed the previous record made Sunday when Moscow hit Ukraine with a total of 537 missiles and drones. At least one person has been found dead so far, and there are more than 24 injured. So Zelensky tweeted the following after that night of bombardment. Firefighting efforts and debris removal are still ongoing after another Russian strike. This was one of the most large-scale air attacks, deliberately massive and cynical. In total, 550 targets were launched, including at least 330 Russian-Iranian Shaheds, along with missiles, including ballistic ones. Notably, the first air raid alerts in our cities and regions yesterday began to blare almost simultaneously with media reports discussing a phone call between President Trump and Putin. Yet again, Russia is showing it has no intention of ending the war and terror. Only around 9 a.m. today did the air raid alert end in Kiev. It was a brutal, sleepless night. So he posts the following videos and photos. We'll play a video here showing some of the damage.
Yeah,
All a real waste, all a real shame. Here's some more photos from his tweet. Pretty terrible stuff. Trump spoke with Zelensky by phone Friday after the latest aerial attacks. They discussed increasing the protection of the sky over Ukraine and potential joint weapons production, Zelensky said in a statement. The call came at a fraught moment. This week, the United States said it was reviewing its weapons supplies and pausing the delivery of several key weapons systems to Ukraine promised by the previous administration, including air defense. NATO chief Mark Rutte said Friday that allies recognize Washington's need to maintain its stocks, but hope to ensure Ukraine keeps getting military supplies. I totally understand for the U.S. to make sure that the stockpiles are at a level that we have the collective defense we need, he told reporters. At the same time, of course, we all hope for a level of flexibility to make sure that also Ukraine has what it needs. He said the weight of backing Ukraine was already shifting to European allies. Kiev's main European backers have sought to mobilize weapons and cash to calibrate to a U.S. administration that has shown no interest in sending Ukraine weapons, as aid approved during the Biden era is expected to run out. Yet European nations are facing shortages and lagging in key capabilities, such as the air defense systems Kiev has been scouting for, including U.S.-made Patriot missiles. U.S. officials have also pointed to global supply issues with production of Patriot systems slower than demand. Now, Trump, let's not forget, touted as a big win at the NATO conference, at the NATO summit, the agreement from European NATO allies to increase their defense spending to, I guess, take some of the burden off of the United States. A NATO summit designed to please President Trump ended on Wednesday with his European allies approving an ambitious spending goal to meet the threat of a militarizing Russia and clinching a long elusive public commitment from the mercurial American leader for the alliance's collective defense. Since his first term, Mr. Trump has been pressing for the allies to spend more on their own defense. On Wednesday, after a one-day meeting in the Netherlands, they agreed to raise their spending on the military to 5% of their national income by 2035. That amount consists of 3.5% on traditional military needs like troops, weapons, shells, and missiles, up sharply from the current target of 2%. Spain, by the way, said they'd go as high as 2.1%. Not anymore. Pretty based place. So not all of the European allies agreed to up it to 5%, but some did. It also includes another 1.5% on militarily adjacent projects like improved roads and bridges, better emergency health care, better cybersecurity, and civic resilience. Mr. Trump was pleased. So here are some of his remarks touting the increase in military budgets from some of our NATO allies.
2 days, I was honored to participate in the NATO leaders meeting and also had extremely good individual discussions with the King and the Queen, Secretary General Rutte, and the Prime Minister. Great discussions, very knowledgeable people. Major focus of our conversations at the summit was the need for other NATO members to take up the burden of the defense of Europe, and that included the financial burden. As you know, it was 2%, and we got it up to 5%. And they said, a couple of them came up to me. One in particular said, "Sir, we've been trying to get it up to 3% for 20 years, and we haven't been able, and you got it up to 5%.
Okay, so not only is the Russia-Ukraine war not winding down, we're, I think, further from a peace deal than at any point during the war.
Yeah.
These Russian attacks keep escalating more and more. You saw clearly Vladimir Putin sending a message to Donald Trump that he and only he, meaning Putin himself, would determine when this war ends. I mean, they said the alerts for the incoming strikes happened pretty much at the same time that Putin and Trump got off of the phone. That is an unmistakable fuck you to the United States from Russia. Not only that, but I always thought
it's almost like Donald Trump is a joke
Yeah.
to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, it's almost like Vladimir Putin doesn't take him seriously. I wonder why. I wonder why. But, another piece of this, and I thought of this because, Trump has always said that he wants the NATO allies to pay more, right? And he's always sort of approached this, in a very transactional way. When you think about it, okay, if Russia keeps attacking Ukraine and there's no ceasefire in sight, and the United States says we're not sending any more weapons, I mean, don't you think that might be Donald Trump's way of squeezing the NATO allies to increase their military funding so that they stop ripping us off, right? Like, if you wanted to be conspiratorial about it, you could say, hey, if Europe wants to keep fighting and Russia won't stop fighting, then if we stop funding Ukraine, that's going to force these NATO allies to increase their military spending.
Oh, I don't think that's conspiratorial. I
Yeah.
think that's exactly right. I think it's kind of obvious.
Yeah. So it seems like what? He realizes the war's not going to end, but I'm going to use this to get the NATO allies to pitch in more for their military spending, which, you may, from a nationalist perspective, be like, good. It's about time they start paying their fair share. All right, fine. Like if that's what you really think is important, you really think that these European countries raising their military spending by 3%, you really think that's important, then God bless you. But whatever your preference is, however you approach that issue, that's certainly not an anti-war position. Like, he is essentially forcing NATO to militarize further. He is trying to militarize Europe more. No? Am I crazy? Am I wrong? That's the effect that this is having. You have no ceasefire. You have a ceasefire further away than it ever was. And because the United States is pulling back without ending the war, now Europe has to militarize even more. How does this make the world safer or more peaceful? This doesn't seem very peace candidate-like to me. It seems like the fighting is worse than ever and that Europe is becoming more militarized than ever.
No, it has nothing to do with peace. Trump either doesn't know or doesn't care that the reason that we have offered this defense umbrella to Europe, if not by treaty, in fact, is in order to have power over them, in order to maintain them as a vassal state. Because if you're entirely dependent on the United States for your defense, well, how much leverage do you have in dictating the course of geopolitical events, right? By doing what he's doing now, he is really reinvigorating and reestablishing Europe as an independent global power in a way that it hasn't been since the end of World War II. Now, Trump seems to feel that our markets are so valuable that people are going to need to come to us anyway to make deals, and we don't need to offer them that security umbrella in order to have that kind of control over world events. I don't think he's right about that, but I think at best, like, if you want to give him credit of having even thought through that aspect of it, that's what he's thinking. What do we need to have all this military over there? They're going to have to deal with us anyway. They're still not going to be able to do anything. And probably, frankly, he probably sees them as pussies who won't act without the United States regardless.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's probably right. And in the meantime, what a shit show, and what a tragic loss of life on both sides. I mean, just hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, well over 1 million at this point.
Well, the fact that the Europeans just won't let this go.
He won't let this go. What, are you crazy?
Jesus. Yeah. I mean, with the Americans pulling out, really, you're going to remilitarize. Europe is very much the inheritor of literally over a millennium of war-induced trauma.
Yeah.
That sure, it's because the United States offered that umbrella that they were able to move into this kind of post-war mindset where they're just going to run their countries based on the social good and essentially demilitarize. So what are you doing? What are you doing, man? Like, you're going to go back to that now? You're going to go
really
back
afraid Russia's going to take them next? Like, that's so
seriously?
Absurd. Yeah.
Like, seriously? Like, really? Why don't you just say, okay, America, take your ball and go home, and we're also not going to remilitarize.
Right.
Who's going to invade Europe? Really? Putin.
Right.
He's gonna go sweep through Europe. That's part of his ambition. I think in an ideal world, Putin might want to bring back what he sees as Russia's historic territory, which of course is not as simple as what he presented to Tucker. These territories changed hands over the centuries between the Austro-Hungarian Empire, between the Russian Empire. They were constantly getting traded around. That's why most nationalism didn't really develop until borders started to harden, because you might be part of one country one year, one country another year. People identified by the village that they were from as being their identity. But ultimately Putin is a very smart, calculating guy. He knows what kind of a shitstorm it would start if he, say, went into Poland. He's not going to do it. He's not going to do it. In an ideal world, would he like to? Probably, but he's not going to do that.
Yeah, and at the beginning of the war, what he's doing now wasn't even really on the table, right? I mean, now you get the sense that he's just going to end this when he wants to, on his terms. But originally, it was very, very simple. Ukraine had to promise not to join NATO. They had to recognize those eastern regions as independent, and they had to recognize the Crimea as Russian, and that would have been that. That would have been that. Right. Russia offered Ukraine those terms even after the fighting started. It might be too late. I mean, it is not might be. It is too late to settle on those terms now. And so now Europe has to ask itself, what do we keep this going for? That's why, man.
Well, maybe
Spain
not.
says,
maybe
yeah,
not.
we'll go as high as 2.1. That's it.
Mi amigo Keaton.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Va a España
Yeah.
en el otoño.
Yeah.
Seriously, we're talking about it. But yeah, I don't know that it's too late for that, but there just seems to be this death drive to just keep this freaking war going, man. I honestly, I'm a little surprised that without the Americans, the Europeans will not sit down and try to settle this.
Yeah. Yep. Pretty crazy. Janice Anderson says food cuts have already begun. My disabled sister lost 70% of her SNAP benefits. Wow. Beginning this month. Guess who's picking up the shortage? Wow. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Janice Anderson. Yep. Well, that is pretty terrible. It's pretty horrible. Tim Barisic, thanks for the $1.99, says just stop funding Ukraine along with others. Thank you, Tim. Conor McGregor was never my friend. Give us $50. Let's have a cowbell for Conor McGregor. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Says, been having a hard time these past few weeks. You guys are great and bring me some real joy. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Connor. Glad to hear we bring you some joy. Sorry you're having a hard time. Thanks for what you do. And y'all are really talented broadcasters. The Alex Jones in a red devil suit is hilarious. My favorite bit and super accurate. Didn't you work for InfoWars for a while? Do you still work for InfoWars? I thought you said you did. Yeah, because you tend to relate to our Alex Jones stuff. But hang in there, man. Absolutely. Mark says history repeats itself, says Professor Brown. Note, first is tragedy, second is farce. I find that unrealistic. Like what? A golfing Hitler in a funny red hat or something. Thank you, Professor Brown. Note, appreciate that. $1 Million Trooper says, going back to consumer infantilization, the first time I noticed Melty was in those Wendy's ads with the ginger girl playing grown-up Wendy, or possibly grown-up Pippi Longstockings. Hasn't stopped. Vito P says, the big... beautiful big contains the Logan's Run Amendment. Cancer sucks. You guys rock. Thank you, Vito. Appreciate that very much. All right, folks. This is going to be our final segment of the night on the YouTube side. So we will be switching to Rumble after this segment. So go to dudissidents.com/Rumble to find this live stream. We have a couple more segments to do after this, and then we'll go right into Q&A. So please stick around with us on Rumble for the last two segments after this one. So you can start heading over there whenever you'd like. That's the link that takes you directly to this very live stream. So, all right, well, one more over on the YouTube side.
Okay. This is kind of a part one to the segment on Bob Villain we're going to do on the Rumble side. First part of this is the BBC side of it. The BBC is having a very bad, no good, awful week. They're getting attacked from all sides, including the sides that say they didn't act fast enough to pull Bob Villain from the airwaves.
Acted appallingly again. It was only 2 months ago that Tim Davies said he was going to crack down on anti-Semitism within the BBC. It's got worse. What is the problem they've got over there? And as I said earlier, the BBC I just cannot get out of this one. How anybody, and I've worked in and around television and radio for a couple of years now, so the minute you're you're into this 20-minute tirade, I won't read it all to you, foul language about music executives, bald-headed F-words, C-words, everything else, and saying, we're live on the BBC, everyone chanting and screaming how hilarious it is. Where was someone to press the kill button? Just pull the plug. There's no conversation to be had here. It's done. It's out. Ridiculous. Recently, a list was released of people trying to stop our mate's kneecap from performing here today. And who do I see on that effing list? But that bald-headed C I used to effing... and on it goes. For 20 minutes. No one pulls the plug. Why? Quite incredible. Avon and Somerset Police have put out a statement. We are reviewing the evidence. What takes so long? Why are you so utterly inept or incompetent that you can't say, yes, an investigation. I'm not expecting you to nick him because you've got to get it all right. Yes, an investigation will proceed, or no, there's nothing to see here. We are reviewing the evidence. Well, you've been reviewing it for days. When might there be some action?
All right, so I'm gonna let our friends across the pond in on a secret. I know we have a lot of viewers over there in England. So it used to be in the before times, BI, before internet, the only aspects of British culture that we got here was the best. We got Monty Python, we got I, Claudius, we got Masterpiece Theater. So we thought that's what was up with y'all. So like Monty Python in their show, a lot of times they would do sketches making fun of bad British TV. But we kind of didn't get that because we never saw that side of British culture.
Right.
I got to say the internet has really lowered your esteem, certainly in America, perhaps around the world, because we realize that in many ways you're just like us. You are truly the mother country in many ways that we didn't know when all we saw was Alistair Cook presenting Jane Eyre. So the BBC here, in a new statement, has revealed that it will no longer broadcast high-risk performances live, high-risk performances, after a criminal investigation was launched into Bob Vylan's Glastonbury set, which the BBC live-streamed. Same week, Channel 4 airs the Gaza documentary the BBC wouldn't broadcast. Just keeps getting worse for the BBC this week. So this is the Center for Media Monitoring commenting on the documentary. You will have seen the fate of Dr. Adnan El-Bursh. In our report, we showed how the BBC mentioned his death just 3 times, omitting UN concerns he died following torture. While the media frets about chants at festivals, it willfully ignores the murder of Palestinians in Gaza. And the chain continues. Tonight's documentary, Gaza Doctors Under Attack, showed the reality of attacks on medics. Yet our analysis found the WHO documented 670 plus health facility attacks, whilst the BBC routinely platformed Israeli claims that these were, quote, Hamas command centers, without challenging this narrative or noting that attacking medical facilities is a war crime. Tonight's documentary series, Gaza Doctors Under Attack, documented systematic destruction of Gaza's medical system. Our analysis found the BBC rarely connected the dots. 670 plus health attacks, yet the term war crimes appeared in only 3% of articles about Israeli actions. The evidence was there, the reporting wasn't. And now, 111 BBC journalists blast broadcaster for censorship of Gaza coverage, call for Robbie Gibbs' board removal. Over 400 other media and entertainment figures, including Mike Lee and Miriam Margolyes, signed the open letter saying reporting is skewing pro-Israel. So we're going to read the letter. It's not that long, but it is worth getting into. We're writing to express our concerns over opaque editorial decisions and censorship at the BBC on the reporting of Israel-Palestine. We believe the refusal to broadcast the documentary Gaza medics under fire is just one in a long line of agenda-driven decisions. It demonstrates once again that the BBC is not reporting without fear or favor when it comes to Israel. We understand that a decision not to broadcast the investigation has been taken by senior BBC management, despite the film's content being signed off in accordance with BBC guidelines and editorial policy. This appears to be a political decision and is not reflective of the journalism in the film. A recent statement from the BBC said broadcasting the film, quote, risked creating the perception of partiality, unquote. This illustrates precisely what many of us have experienced firsthand. An organization that is crippled by the fear of being perceived as critical of the Israeli government. We are not asking the BBC to take a side. We are asking to be allowed to do our jobs in delivering facts transparently and with due context. For many of us, our efforts have been frustrated by opaque decisions made at senior levels of the BBC without discussion or explanation. Our failures impact audiences. As an organization, we have not offered any significant analysis of the UK government's involvement in the war on Palestinians. We have failed to report on weapons sales or their legal implications. These stories have instead been broken by the BBC's competitors. This hasn't happened by accident, rather by design. Much of BBC's coverage in this area is defined by anti-Palestinian racism. The inconsistent manner in which guidance is applied draws into focus the role of Sir Robbie Gibb on the BBC board and BBC's editorial standards committee. We are concerned that an individual with close ties to the Jewish Chronicle, an outlet that has repeatedly published anti-Palestinian and often racist content, has a say in the BBC's editorial decisions in any capacity, including the decision not to broadcast Gaza medics under fire. This conflict of interest highlights a double standard for BBC content makers who themselves experience censorship in the name of impartiality. In some instances, staff have been accused of having an agenda because they have posted news articles critical of the Israeli government on their social media. By comparison, Gibb remains an influential post with little transparency regarding his decisions, despite his ideological leanings being well known. We can no longer ask license fee payers to overlook Gibbs's ideological allegiance. For our American viewers, you have to pay a license fee in England if you have a TV. Since October 2023, it has become increasingly clear to our audiences that the BBC's reporting on Israel-Palestine falls short of our editorial standards. There is a gulf between the BBC's coverage of what is happening in Gaza and the West Bank and what our audiences can see is happening via multiple credible sources, including human rights organizations, staff at the UN, and journalists on the ground. Whilst there has been some exceptional content from some areas of the BBC, within documentary and from some individual correspondents, for example, news in particular has failed to report the reality and the context of the war on Palestinians. All too often, it is felt that the BBC has been performing PR for the Israeli government and military. This should be a cause of great shame and concern for everyone at the BBC. Despite these failings, there has been a major shift within public discourse in recent months. Increasingly, the scale of Israel's crimes against the Palestinians are being understood by the public as well as many of our parliamentarians. The BBC's editorial decisions seem increasingly out of step with reality. We have been forced to conclude that decisions are made to fit a political agenda rather than serve the needs of audiences. As industry insiders and as BBC staff, we have experienced this firsthand. The issue has become even more urgent with recent escalations in the region. Again, BBC coverage has appeared to downplay Israel's role, reinforcing an Israel first framing that compromises our credibility. We, the undersigned BBC staff, freelancers, and industry figures, are extremely concerned that the BBC's reporting on Israel and Palestine continues to fall short of the standards our audiences expect. We believe the role of Robbie Gibb, both on the board and as part of the editorial standards committee, is untenable. We call on the BBC to do better for our audiences and recommit to our values of impartiality, honesty, and reporting without fear or favor. So this is signed by 107 BBC journalists who stayed anonymous and 300 media industry figures, including, you can see there, Mike Lee, some of whom remained anonymous, some of whom did not. So this is a little from the Wrap. The letter posted earlier this week also includes signatories from Day of the Jackal actor Khalid Abdallah, prominent author and activist Shola Mos Shogbamimu, actress Juliet Stevenson, and more. Sectors of the BBC represented by anonymous signees include BBC News, BBC World Service, BBC Nations and Regions, BBC Digital, and BBC Operations. In a statement to media obtained by The Guardian, a BBC spokesperson wrote in response to the letter, quote, "Robust discussions amongst our editorial teams about our journalism are an essential part of the editorial process. We have ongoing discussions about coverage and listen to feedback from staff, and we think these conversations are best had internally. Regarding our coverage of Gaza, the BBC is fully committed to covering the conflict impartially and has produced powerful coverage from the region. Alongside breaking news, ongoing analysis, and investigations, we have produced award-winning documentaries such as Life and Death in Gaza and Gaza 101. I'm sure a letter like this could easily be written if they were to find the courage and addressed to CNN, addressed to MSNBC, addressed essentially to the entire media establishment in the United States. Good for them that they wrote this, and the letter is absolutely right in that increasingly this establishment, corporate media, I mean, that's public media, but you're forced to pay for it, which they point out in the letter. If you have a TV license in England, you're funding the BBC. So you're forced to pay for this propagandistic coverage, unlike MSNBC, which you can choose not to support by not watching it. And certainly you don't have to subscribe to it. You have no choice but to support this in England, which I think makes the issue more charged. But yes, in a world of alternative media, social media, independent media, world media that we now have access to through the internet, there's an increasing disconnect between what people can see with their own eyes is happening in Gaza and what these outlets like the BBC are reporting. And this week, a lot of these contradictions really came to a head where they're trying to control the conversation and they can't anymore. They're trying to get everyone's hair on fire about what Bob Vylan said at a music festival while people are literally watching people being massacred at aid delivery sites by sadistic monsters. Good on them for putting out this letter. We need to see more of this. To be fair, on this side of the pond, we did see remarkably about a month ago a lot of Hollywood figures, about that number, I think around 300, signed a letter in regards to this. Obviously, we need more than letter writing, but it does tell you how far this conversation has come, that you got so many prominent figures who were willing to publicly make this kind of a statement. Unmute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, that's totally true. And to me, the thing about the piece in there that really stood out was these people are saying, like, look, we're not asking the BBC to take a position. We're asking the BBC to
Right.
let us do our job.
Right.
Just let us do
Right.
our jobs.
Right.
We're reporters. We're journalists. You're a publicly funded outlet. Taxpayers pay for this, which means this should not function as one-sided propaganda because it's not a commercial product
Right.
that's being marketed to a certain fragment of the population, right? So just let us do our jobs. Let us work. And don't give us these opaque reasons why you can't publish our stuff or why you spiked this documentary. I mean, these are the kinds of black boxes that we're used to dealing with on social media, right? You put a post up, oh, this violates this policy, and so not as many people are going to see this, or this has to get taken down, or you can't show this to people who are under 18. How do you get clarification on those things? It's very difficult because we're not really dealing with people. Well, these people, they are dealing with people, and yet they're being just as obtuse about what about why they can't, run with certain stories, why they can't cover certain things in certain ways. Why should we have to deal with that? They say, look, your job as a publicly funded news outlet is to not take a position, but to let your people do their jobs. Let us work. We're journalists. Let us do our jobs. That's all they're asking. And the fact that they're not able to do that shows, yes, an obvious bias and an obvious racism. Yes, obviously. So yeah, it's pretty disgraceful. It's pretty disgraceful what they did with that documentary. I mean, it just shows ill intent, quite frankly. It shows ill motive that you would spike a documentary on that. And I forget the exact reasons that they gave. We got into it last time. Because
I think they said bias. It was bias against Israel.
No, they said it was what they did was okay. So there was a guy who I think narrated another documentary that they had put out, who had a family member that they said was Hamas, but the guy worked for the agricultural department, so he was not even a combatant, not even a fighter, just someone who worked for the government. Yeah, they gave some just an obviously bullshit excuse for why they can't put this documentary out.
From what I saw though, researching this, the Channel 4 airing of this got a lot of attention.
Okay, well that's good. That is good. That is good to know. All right, we got the Barisic, says just stop funding Ukraine along with others. Thank you. Scorpionic Sag, thanks for the $4.99. What does Bob Dylan think about Bob Dylan? Haha. Kuznetsky Bassane,
you know what? On my intermission, the whole intermission is actually an Al Jazeera journalist talking about that, talking about Bob Dylan in relation to this and the history of musicians taking stands on these kinds of issues.
Oh, interesting. Well, that is coming up right about now. So, folks, you can go to dudissidents.com/rumble. We have two more stories that we're going to do, although I think we should do a third one because this just broke while we were on the air. I'll tease it out right now, but then we will cover it when we make the switch. But how's this? Exclusive from Axios, DOJ and FBI conclude Epstein had no client list and definitely self-deleted. And they say in this memo, no further arrests in connection with the Epstein case. No further charges. No further charges.
Wow.
Nothing to see here, folks. So we'll read that live. You'll get our live reaction to that.
Tell me more about James Comey's daughter.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Really shaking up the establishment over there. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino. Really, what a threat to the deep state.
Wow.
What a war on the deep state this crew waged. They have masked ICE agents breaking up car washes, but no new arrests.
No client list.
No client list, no new arrests, no nothing. Never mind. Yeah, nothing. Never mind that Epstein case.
Turns out that island was a water park for needy children, actually.
Exactly. Yeah, that was actually the Jurassic Park island. They had dinosaurs out there is what it was. That's why it was so secretive because, dinosaurs, big secret. Obviously.
The fan of the playground was the cover story.
Yeah, right. That was the cover story. It's actually a dinosaur theme park. DoDissidents.com/Rumble. We're going to do that Epstein story live. You're going to get our live reactions because we're going to go in raw on that one. And then we have 2 more Israel-Palestine stories on the other side. So we got plenty of show left, and then we're going to go right into your calls. But there will be a 5-minute intermission until we see you again. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks to the YouTubers. Thanks to the mods in the chat. Jake is sticking with us, and we hope you guys will stick with us because we have plenty of show left. So DoDissidents.com/Rumble. If Rumble is blacked out in your area, we will remain live on X. So please tune in to Rumble to watch the remainder of the show. We have plenty more to go. Until then, we are going to pause for a 5-minute intermission. Be safe and be well.
Courage!
Please clap.